Okay, so it's been a while since I've really worked in this program a lot. So if I fumble or stumble around just a little bit, don't worry, we'll still be able to get it across. This is what I used during COVID to actually deal with lighting. It's a program called Satellite. It's actually made by a company in Germany, really nice group of guys in Germany. We have tons of licenses for this. If you guys want to play around, if you're ever interested in playing around with this, just send me an email and say, God, I'd love to try that stuff out. I'll send you a license key for it. You can use the license key until I have to reset them. So just so that you know, I have 120 licenses right now. There's about 40 of them that are out. I keep just giving them out until I reach the point where I need to do 40 more and I don't have any left, and then I reset them all. So you, again, if you get the license now, it'll last you probably at least a year. It could last you a lifetime. It just depends. So, but I'm more than happy to do that if you want to explore it. It's a pretty insane program. So it's all about lighting in the studio, but it is based on not only three-dimensional spaces, but real understanding from the underlying physics point of view about how light works and that sort of stuff. So you'll see if you, like for instance, if you change the color of the walls in the room, it completely changes the exposure and it changes everything. It's pretty remarkably, it's a deep program. So at any rate, I've got a whole series of videos on it that you can also watch on my YouTube channel to sort of get you up and running. So that's basically what's going on here. So to give you just a quick rundown of what's happening here that we're looking at right here, this is actually the studio space right here. Sorry. Hang on one second, guys. I think I can use a 2-button mouse on this. So at any rate, the big image that you're looking at on the left side of the screen right here, this is where you actually do all the work about placing stuff, this out of the other. The image on the little thumbnail that's up on the top right-hand corner is what the camera actually sees. So this is based on exposure. So the idea that they had behind all of this, let me see if, oh yay, it says work. The idea they had behind all of this is that you could actually create your lighting in the privacy of your own home and then actually just export all of the lighting diagrams. This is the lighting diagram for what this actually looks like. I think it's here. This is the whole lighting diagram of everything that's going on. So if you separate these parts out, so it allows you to build this in software and then export this as a lighting diagram to your assistants to actually set up for you so that you could walk in the studio and actually have this ready to go. So that's what this is all about. View is actually showing you this again. These are now large thumbnail or large versions of what this file, of what the camera's actually going to see on this. So you can control all sorts of things in this. So let me give you a tour around this room. Ooh, I don't have a zoom button. I'm going to zoom out here so that you can sort of see what's going on here. So basically, I've got a camera here, I've got a model here, I've got a main light here, I've got 2 side lights here, I've got a green background in a big room on top of a platform surrounded by black cards. Does that make sense what's going on? So the first thing that you actually want to set up is the green background. So if we actually take a look at this, there's a reason that I'm actually on a platform. If you can take a look at the image that's right over here, you can see that because she's raised up, I don't see any of the floor. I don't see any of this floor right here. The green screen, the chroma key part, is straight down. Again, the goal in doing really good chroma key work is that you have one single color for your background. You don't want any variation. You do not want this background to be lighter up here in the corner and darker down here. Again, that makes the whole process that we use to knock out more difficult. You also want these to be, so it needs to be completely evenly lit, which is why I've actually got, these lights set up. So you've got double lights here to actually cover this entire green, And the same thing on the other side. You'll also notice that all of these lights have actually got green gels on front of them. So what we're doing is that we're using, and in the studio here, they have this green background and they also have the gels that are designed for chroma key. So the trick to this is that this goes back to the conversation that we've had before. Why I'm holding up this measuring tape, and you see it as sort of a shade of red or orangish, right? Why? Why is this the color you see? It's two things. Reflecting is one, but what else is happening? Everything else is being absorbed. So that's why we see the color. So filters work the exact same way. It absorbs all the color that is not the filter, but then the color of the filter it actually allows to pass through, because filters are transparent. So instead of reflecting, it's transmissive. Does that make sense, everyone? So by gelling these lights, I kill all the colors except for green to hit that background, which saturates the background. If I don't have those gels on it, then all the reds, all the yellows, all the oranges, all the blues, greens, everything is hitting that thing, and I'm getting that kickback. It's not anywhere near as pure as if I filter them all so that the only thing is hitting is green, and I get this green back. This doesn't just work for chroma key, guys. This works for anything that you do in the studio. You want really hyper-saturated color background? Gel the heads that are on the background, and it will intensify them incredibly. Make sense? So anyway, that's what my setup is going on here. Then my challenge with the girl is that I don't want any spill happening around her. That's something that we fight all the time. So in my case right here, what I've done, you can see there's a great deal of separation between her and this background. You want to get as much separation as you possibly can. So the way I do that is, hang on one second. Oh, sorry, I'll just zoom back out a little bit more. The way I do this is I set up my green screen first. It hangs straight down. You want it as tall as you can get it, because again, she's up on a platform, which means I've got to get lower, and as I get lower, I can run out of background above her head. That's a problem. It's better to run out of background underneath her feet than it is her head, because usually her feet, it's shoes or something, it's an easy pin tool knockout, whereas her hair is not going to be that. That's the bigger challenge of it all. So at any rate, hang on one second. I gotta add a note really quick. Okay, so I set up my background first. I get my camera as far away from that background as I can possibly get, and then I get it framed vertically, because that's how I'm going to, if I'm shooting people, that's how I would shoot it. If I was shooting a group of people horizontally, again, I set it up so that I can basically frame the background so that the background completely fills my frame. So if you were to take a look at this really closely, what you would see is just beyond the edges of this background is the wall, is the gray wall. So that gives me the distance that I need to be away from my background and still have my green screen fill the entire frame of my camera. Does that make sense, everybody, what I'm doing? Then I actually have a model stand right in front of the green background and start walking towards me, and I have them stop right before they start to go outside of the frame. And that's how I maximize my distance from the green to where my figure goes. Does that make sense? All right, you're not gonna see this on this, but you'll see it right here. So this is my green background. This is my total height right here. So just this space right in here. So I set my camera up right here because I'm against the wall. Here, I'll set it up right here. I can't go any further back. I'm against the wall. So this is where my camera goes. So then I orient it so that when I'm looking through this, I use a zoom to actually come in so that just the very edges of the green are just outside my frame, so that my frame is completely filled with that green, but no more. I can always zoom in. I could put a 500mm lens on here and it would actually pick a 1-inch patch on that wall. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for maximum space of my green. Does that make sense, everyone? And then with my camera here, looking through it, I actually have somebody stand right here at the background. And I actually do this. I don't just have I actually put my arms up like this because I want my model to be able to do this kind of stuff, right? And if I have it set so it just touches my head to toe, I can't do this or my hands are going to go outside my frame. So I do this, and I just start to walk towards the camera. And somebody who's looking at it says, okay, no, you still got quite a room to go, whatever. And I get right here and they say, nope, that's it. Then this is where your model goes. Does that make sense? And that's exactly what I did in this scenario right here. You can, again, you can move the models, you can move the lights, you can do all of that kind of stuff. So that's how you set this part up. We've already talked about why she's actually on this platform, and you can see it right here. If I'm oriented like this, if my camera's this high, I see the whole bottom of the floor right here. I don't want to see that. So if I go down, I actually lose all of that part. So this is actually right behind my camera right now. This is what you see right here, like this. So that you can see, I don't have a complete silo on her feet. If I could get to that perfect edge where the center of my lens was right exactly at the top of this riser, then I would be able to see all of her feet and I wouldn't have any issue here. Does that make sense what's going on here? We good on this part? Okay, then I've got a main light that I've actually going on up here, and so when I can turn my main light on and off, we'll sort of see what that part ultimately does and how it impacts this whole part. But I just want to make sure that there's no more questions about the rough setup of this. Okay, the reason I've got these black cards around here is I'm trying to eliminate any spill that's around her. So the problem that I've got is that this green background is a giant green light. And if I don't have these cards on the sides and above her, that light is going to hit off the, even though the wall's gray, it's going to hit off that gray wall and bounce right back into her. Then I've got green spill on her that I've got to knock out, and there's no reason for it. Does that make sense? Now, if you don't have, like, let's say that when you're shooting this, this is what you actually see. You see these gray edges on the side here. Guys, that doesn't matter. As long as the girl is completely surrounded, or whatever you're shooting, girl, guy, dog, banana, whatever it is, if it's completely surrounded by green, even if you've got parts of the room showing on the other side, it doesn't matter because you are just going for that edge. All you need to make sure is that you've got green going around that edge. Does that make sense, everyone? Yes. Oh, foam core, just V-flats. Yeah, so basically I will take, like, if this is your platform, I'm the camera, this is your platform, you take a V-flat and you stick one edge of it up on top of the platform and you put a C-stand on the other side. And you're good to go. Or if you have singles, if you just have a single foam core that's black, then again, you would just put the single foam core right there. You can do it with gobos, but we don't have really gigantic gobos, so that's basically why we're doing these. You don't look like that completely answered what you were asking. You don't get what? No. So this, if you take a look, this, hang on one sec. All this is a big flat. It's just one of those 4x8 black flats. The same thing. It just rests on the top. You really don't need to worry about the top in the studio because the studio has a black ceiling. This room does not. Make sense? You okay with that? Okay. The thing is that typically this is a 4x8 platform, so it's the same size as one of those. So if you have those side walls in at all, you've got more than enough for it to rest on the very top. And they're really sturdy, so they're not going to bow in or any of that kind of stuff. And then you're worried about it all falling apart and killing somebody along the way. Yeah, welcome to the studio. Are we good? You don't seem like it. If you choose to do, well, you can see how this is just like resting right here on that edge. Yeah, okay. All right, so anyway, that's basically what's going on. Again, in the studio here, you don't need to worry about this top part because the ceiling is already black. It's painted black in the studio. So the side ones are the only ones you need to worry about. Sorry. That's going to be going on all day. No, I'm really more somebody's bitch, but yeah, I know, right? Okay, so that's my setup here. Then there's a couple of things that I've got that I need to worry about. So the lights that are on the side cannot hit my subject, but I also don't want my main light to hit the background. That's the challenge, because if this main light actually hits the background, then it's going to light up part of it, but not all of it. So to see what I mean by that, I'm gonna turn off all the background lights. And now you can see this is the shadow coming from my main light right here. You can see it running right back here. If we take a look at this from the top, you can see that I've got that main light set up so that the shadow misses this. It goes to the side. But you can see that that shadow from that light is actually causing this thing across the very top. That is the shadow from the roof that I've got on top of this thing. Does that make sense? So here, I'll show you what it looks like if I get rid of the roof. That shadow goes away. So your main light has an impact. Now, sometimes it's unavoidable. What I am trying to show you is the ideal, perfect way of doing it. But if you need your light to be in a different spot, so for instance, if you need your light to move and not be so side, but to actually come over. Son of a... You now see I've got a shadow. Her shadow is directly on that background. That's going to create complications for me. So, but in a perfect world, that's what I'm actually looking for. Does this make sense, everyone? Okay, then when it comes to the girl itself, let me turn everybody back on. Actually, I've done so many changes here. I want to go right back into it. Okay, so are there any other, so in my situation here, I'm going to trade these. This is now what my camera is actually seeing. This is the big version. So what we've got going on here is your subject needs to be normally exposed and lit the way you want them lit. That's your job, right? Do not try to force your lighting to make sure that your green is okay. That's not the point. You still need to have the lighting that you want. So is your lighting soft? Is it hard? Is it directional? Is it coming from the side? Is it coming from the top? Is it coming from straight on camera? All of those decisions you need to make. Do not let the green drive you for that. Be aware of it, but don't let it drive you crazy, right? So then the figure is normal, but the side, the background here, and it's unfortunate I don't have, well, actually I do have a readout here that I can show you what the readout is. So if we go to, this is only on Apple computers, this is not on Windows, but if you go into your Macintosh, into your application folder, this is something every single photographer in this room who has a Mac should actually have on their dock, in my opinion. If you go into the utilities folder, there is a digital color meter right here. If you launch that, it actually will stay up on top of everything you do until you close it. So no matter what program I go into, it can actually sit up on top of that program. So this is now sitting on top of it. You can move it around. I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and say, I want to see these in RGB values. And then when I hover over this, it's actually giving my readout right here. So I'm getting a 34, 214, 21. I mean, that's what basically I'm getting. When I come up here and take a look at her forehead, what am I looking for up here about exposure? Say what? So again, the white patch on a color card would be 245 to 250. But as another check for perfect exposure for me, if I go to a highlight on a Caucasian skin, I'm looking for a value in the red channel of 225 to 245. This is now a reading of 235, which is my perfect target. It's a little bit, 225 would be a normal exposure, normal, like portrait, normal exposure. 245 will be about the most you can really push that channel. You would do that if you're really trying to blow somebody's face out to actually lighten them up so that you suppress texture, you don't show wrinkles, you fill all of that kind of stuff. 235 is a sweet spot for me, and that's why this thing is set right where it is. So the exposure parts on this are correct. I don't have a luminosity reading on this, which I regret. I wish I did. And the reason I want a luminosity reading on this is that you want your color, your green, to have a luminosity of as close to 128 as you can. And that is because you want that background as saturated as you can possibly have it. I'm going to show you what that means right now. Are there any questions about the setup, though? I feel like we could have done this in the studio in less time. Sorry. That was a joke. Wow, you guys are, you're either, no, I'm not going to say that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to quit this. So what I've done is I've made 3 exposures on this. I'm going to show you the exposures that I've made. And this is what you want to do to actually check things out. So my first exposure is with the figure lit, no lights on the background. Why am I doing this? I want to see, if it's far enough back, most importantly, I want to see if I'm throwing shadows on this background from my main light. And I can't see it if I've got all those lights on, right? So is my figure casting a shadow on it? Are the cards that I've got casting a shadow on it? Now, in certain cases, it doesn't matter. If the card is actually on the background, like you can see there's a shadow of the card right here, but that's not interfering with the edge of the girl, so I don't care. Make sense? So that's the first image you do. The second image is just the reverse. You turn off the main light and you only show the background lights. Why? No. I'm looking for spill. If I zoom way in on this girl, I will see spill. And you're going to actually see it. We're going to look at it. We're going to look at this action capture one. And then again, you would put them both together. Those are the 3 frames you always want to do when you're first starting this part out. So I'm going to stop this program really quickly. We are going to take those same images. Where are you? So here in Capture One, again, I can zoom in. Sorry, that was not what I wanted to do. Zoom in, highlight on her forehead, 237 in the red channel. That's exactly what I want this to be. Then I'm going to go to my next frame and I'm going to hover over the background. Now I'm getting a 158 in my luminosity. The perfect place for me would have this to be 128 because it gives me the greatest saturation. Why do I say that? Look what happens if I change my exposure. Everybody, look at this screen. I'm going to bump my exposure up on this. And I'm going to crank it way up. And that's not what it actually looks like. Now that'll give you a better idea. I'm going to go way down in this. And you can see that underexposure on this causes it to be muddy, right? You don't keep the saturation. The truth of it is it's misleading what's going on in here. I think this is because of the JPEG nature of all of this. It's brighter, but I lose saturation in this. If we go back to our you guys remember this, right? HSB, color wheel goes on its side. As we start to, so again, hue is the equator that's going around this. Saturation goes from the center to the outside, but then brightness goes up to the top and down to the bottom. As we move up, we get brighter, but look what's happening to your saturation. Because you're getting brighter and brighter and brighter and you're moving towards white, you lose saturation. The opposite holds true as well. As you start to go down towards black here, everything starts to get darker and you lose saturation. So the most saturated place you can be is your perfect midtone. In a scale of 0 to 255, that perfect midtone is 128. So that's why I'm looking for a luminosity of 128 in Capture One, because it means I've got the greatest saturation. If I look at this background, and I'm reading here, again, my exposure, let me neutralize that out. Here it's reading a 158. I'm close. I'm 20 points off, 30 points off here. I would bring it down just slightly, but I'm pretty close here. Does that make sense to everybody what's going on in here? So then finally I put the two of them together just to make sure that everything that I'm looking at in here functions. And then when I go to do the knockout, this is a really simple knockout, and I just have to do, you guys have already done 2 or 3 of mine. I just need to go in and actually use the pen tool on her shoes and I'm fine. Oh, why is the floor this black? Why isn't it green? She's standing on a black floor. Why? If it was green, what would happen? Absolutely, my main light, my key light would hit the front of that green and splash green fucking all over her. And then I've got to deal with spill all over her. I would much rather just suffer with the pen tool and do that than I would be trying to make that thing green so that I could actually just use my 0 selective color to do the whole 9 yards. Questions about any of this? Are we good? You know, it's funny you would say that. You'll actually pick up shadows on that because even though it's a black floor, it doesn't ever go completely black. So you'll see the outline of the shadows. But the truth of it is, I can use that to inform the shadow that I ultimately create for my composite. But rarely do I use the shadows that already exist, because you're absolutely right. If you're dropping them onto, let's say like a white sidewalk or a light colored sidewalk, whatever, you're going to keep a big part of the green, or at least part of the tone of that black floor is going to translate to your composite. So you need to do the complete knockout. Typically, I knock all the shadows out of the figures that I shoot on grease screen. I eliminate them all. Again, I'm masking them out, so I can always turn the mask off to refer to, well, what does the shape of the real shadow look like? Because that will inform the shadow that you want to fake. But then I fake it. Are we good on this part? Yes. So the first one, this one, the reason I do this is that I'm trying to spot anything that's hitting my background from my main light. Now, if it, let's say I put it, I'm doing a beauty dish and I put my main light right over the top of my camera, I'll be fine because it's an even light hitting the whole background. I'm probably still going to need to use my background lights to raise it up a little bit to get to that mid-tone and to try to saturate as much as I can, but that's not what causes me problems. It's when the minute you put a light to one side or another, if they are too close to the background, you throw a serious shadow of the figure onto the background, and there's no way that you can really give yourself a perfectly even background when that happens. And this is the easiest way to spot it. You'll see everything that causes a shadow. You'll see knuckles on arms that cause shadows. You'll see a ladder. You'll see anything. So it's a check.
And then the second one was the check for spill.
So this is a check for spill. So again, you zoom way in, and you'll see it in this image. You can see there's a little bit of spill right here in her hair, but you'll see spill on the side of her face. And if that's the case, then I know I need to bring in darker cards on the side. I need to do something. I need to check to make sure that there's that I am indeed using, because the other thing, Chloe, about those side cards is they gobo out my background lights. My background lights can't hit me, can't hit her. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I mean, it's all the way around. Without them, those side lights would be edge lighting all on the girl and it would all be bright green. So this is just a check for spill. And then this is the total overhaul guy. And I do this one because I actually then pull this immediately into Photoshop and I run a zero selective color on it and see how successful it is or what problems I might have. Other questions? Are we good? Okay. I got one other thing to show you really quickly and then we'll take a quick break, I promise. So if you look in your session 13, there is a PDF in there that goes over all the rough things that we just talked about. Setting up photography, it's a chroma key setup in here. So you've got sort of a kind of a recipe thing to actually make sure that that part works. And then I always feel like it's a lottery every time I launch a Photoshop file about what Photoshop is actually going to open. Oh, the new shitty one. Okie dokie. So I get this all the time. People talk about what kind of background that you should actually be shooting on. So if you take a look at this setup right here, all it is a white patch, a gray patch, and a black patch. So I hear this all the time, oh, I should be just shooting everything on white. It's so much easier to knock out stuff on white. And that's true until you have something that is white, and then whatever's white simply disappears into the background and you're screwed. So then everybody says, oh, well, no, I didn't mean to say that. You should shoot on black. Well, that also works for the white and the gray, but the black is gone. Oh, no, we should just do it on a middle gray. Okay, well, that's fine, but you keep the black and the white, but you lose the gray. The disadvantage to using a tone of gray on the background is that whatever tone it is, you are going to miss if that tone exists in your figure that you're trying to knock out. So the advantage of actually going to green is that green has two things going for it. It has color, and you can see in this case it separates all of these perfectly. But it also has tone. So if I'm going to throw a black and white layer on top of this. So in this case, because of its tone, it's not really great for separating the tone in the middle, but it excels at separating from the white on the top and the black on the bottom. But what I can use here is the green is what separates my midtones. I get both. I get, in this green, I get a mid-tone of gray if I convert this, but I also get a hue. I get that green color. And if my green color does not exist in my scene, it's the best thing in the world that I can use. Does that make sense, everyone? The other option that you can use instead of green is blue. And the reason, only difference between these two, the reason they picked green and blue is that they actually looked for complementary colors of Caucasian skin. And that's the range it falls in, especially the green one. And the reason they do that, it all comes from movie theater. And I mean, you guys have seen a million setups on the weather, on TV and all that kind of stuff. They all use green screen, all of them. And again, the reason that you do that is that it is as far from Caucasian skin as you can get. So it separates Caucasian skin really well. And to a certain extent, all other skin tones as well. From a color perspective, remember when we were talking about doing our color numbers, we were talking about very slight variations to actually get African American skin. That's really just an addition of black pigment to, again, a normal Caucasian color. Asian skin tends to run slightly more yellow. But again, they are all really close in color. So I don't mean to imply that green screen was designed for white people only. That would be a mischaracterization. But the reason that you have the option of either green or blue is if you've got subject matter that has either of one of these as a dominant part of it. So you find, especially in fashion, very rare cases of pure green. Now, I'm a liar every St. Patrick's Day because everybody wears green. But who in this room right now is wearing green? Anyone? No one. Who in here is wearing blue? Maybe. So Mario, maybe, right? So if that was the case, I would definitely push this towards shooting this on green, right? But let's say I had, a whole new set of police uniforms that I was going to shoot. They were all blue. Those would be on green. Let's say I'm going to shoot the posters for the new Wicked movie. Well, there's a part of that that involves series green, and in that case, I would put it on a blue screen to actually knock it out. Make sense? Questions about any of this? Okay, guys, I've got 2:15. Let's make it a hard 10, be back at 2:25, and we'll actually start working on complex shadows. Shoot. For the okay, so confession time. I graded 2, maybe 3 of the initial, the 9-1 composites that were actually turned in. My apologies for that, but I have spent the last month rewriting the curriculum for the photography department.
The entire photography?
The entire photography department. It's a lot of work. That's all I can say is, so I have been balancing this, and I was hoping to get to more of it this morning, but I had to present a 3-hour presentation to my photography curriculum rewriting working group this morning. Yeah. I feel fucking beat up. But I will promise you I will be caught up. I'm trying to be as good about grading as I can. I've heard from a number of you that you're kind of pissed off that nobody is actually giving you any grades at all, and they're way behind and all that. And that's just, I think that's wrong. I think you should know where you stand, and I think you should have feedback so that what you do next week benefits from the feedback that you got this week, instead of me all of a sudden saying, oh yeah, by the way, you remember smart objects that we did in week number 3? Well, I finally decided to grade your smart object assignment. We are way beyond that, right? So at any rate, I plan on getting that. So anyway, Mark had a composite that I took a look at that involves a lot of what I'm going to show you right now in terms of complex shadows. It's not quite as obvious. I was going to just do this whole demonstration on his, and then actually, so that you guys would get the benefit of all of that, but instead I'm going to go back and do it the way that I've normally done it before. And then Mark can actually take a look at it. We can take a look, if we have time, we'll take a look at his image and sort of see, because I did a version of it that I've actually saved, and you can sort of see what Mark turned in, which by the way was incredibly well done. So not perfect, but very well done. So anyway, for what it's worth, I feel like I'm rambling here. All right, you're not going to see this on the video, so I'm actually going to pause the video for 1 second. I just want to show you guys what a complex shadow is and how it actually works. And again, it's nothing I can do. It's something I have to do in real time. So let me pause the video. Okay, recording again. All right, so the file that we are looking for, it's going to be from last week, which was session 10. Please do this with me. So session 10 in your folder, it's actually a thing called 940copy.psd. If you can launch that, and it should open up and look blue. Everybody got this? Okay. So this was a composite that I really wanted to do, and it was designed, I had in my old house, we actually had the top floor of a building, and so you could go out on the roof. And so I built this small little model. So the model that I built was probably, you know, it's probably about like this size, this kind of thing right here, like a large book, like almost coffee table book size, about that size. So a little more, a foam core, that's all it was. I just cut I kept thinking, God, it would be really great if I had these pictures of, you know, those like quintessential scenes of Santa Fe where it's just those completely white buildings and then blue sky behind it. If you don't know those pictures, look up Bruce Weber. He's shot there forever doing this kind of shit, fashion photographer. Anyway, that was the vibe that I was going for, and I thought, well, this is great. I can create my set out of just this foam core that I got laying around, and I'm going to take it upstairs and shoot it in sunlight, in the real sunlight. I don't have to, like, you know, I'm going to use the real deal, and then I'll composite something into it. So that's the premise of how this whole thing started. So if you take a look at the layer stack at the very bottom, the only thing that's actually on is a single image. It actually is a real picture of the sky, but I've modified it. I've changed the color of it. There is a woman named, I want to say, it's Camille Arkins. Anyway, she shoots a ton for, I think, I'm not sure she's still alive, but she used to do a ton for Harper's Bazaar. And she made this classic. It was this classic color of blue sky. It was not a real blue sky. It was off. It's exactly this color. I know it is because I've scanned a ton of her photographs, softened them, and then read the color values on the photographs in the scans in Photoshop and actually duplicated the color exactly here. But if you double click on this thing and open it up, you'll actually see it is a raw file that's actually just a picture of, this is just a picture of the sky. So anyway, that's what's going on here. So if we go to the next layer up, I want you to skip over that one for just a second and go to the one above that. So the next layer up, you can actually see this is my rooftop. So there's plants that are sitting on the other rooftop, but this was the model that I made. So it's just a diagonal piece of foam core against a sort of like shaped parapet wall with a floor, right? And so that's basically all that's going on here. The thing is, though, I didn't want these plants to show in the background because that clearly would have showed scale, right? So if you hold down your shift key and you click on the little X that's right on the layer mask, you can see it gets rid of it. And this really had more to do with the scene that I was looking for. However, you'll also notice now, though, that the edge of the foam core where it meets the horizon is jagged, and so is the edge. If you zoom in really closely, you'll see, by the way, isn't this a much better picture than we've been looking at for the last week or two or month or before anybody said, Jesus, how bad could that picture be? Well, we don't know yet, right? Because it's really just, you know, two colors, right? But hopefully when the figure gets there, it'll work. Okay, so anyway, I needed to clean those parts up. So to clean that part up, if you go up to the top, not the top, but just right above this layer of the background. Click on the next one. All that does is clean up those edges. That's all it is meant to do. And now if you go back down and see our very base layer, the blue sky right above it is a gradient. If you click on that, you can actually see it puts a gradient into the sky, which is how skies actually work. If you know anything about polarizing light, you know that, again, as you start to actually, on a really bright, clear day, as you start to look up straight in around noontime, whatever, you will actually get a much more saturated blue than you get at the horizon line. It all has to do with the angle of the light that's coming in and hitting all the particles that are in the atmosphere. So this is to sort of accentuate what happens naturally. So this is my background. And then if we go up to the very top, there is a group called body. If you click on it, it's just a figure of this person sitting there. That's all this is. Does this make sense? And does everybody have this part? Okay, number one thing, I've got no shadows on here. I need to create them. And number two thing, what's wrong with this setup? What's my first move? First move is lighting direction. Where's the lighting direction coming from the girl? So you're saying the light's on the right side of the girl? I've got the light side of the girl. I've got the front of the girl. I can't believe you guys fucking no idea where the girl. So no, this happens all the time. Every single one of you is looking at the highlights on this person. You'll never tell the direction of light from the highlights. There's only one thing that'll give it to you. Just one, the shadows. What side, let's all zoom in together, what side is the shadow on this girl's face? Even better, what shadow is on her arm? Ooh, that's an easy one to tell right now. Oh, I know. Where's the shadow on her leg? Oh, let's see. It's all on the right side, which means the light has got to be on the left side. Yeah, it was camera right. Right, Mario? It was camera right. You're exactly right. You get an A. All right. Where's the light on the background? Well, can you see a shadow in the background? Yeah, it's right here, right? You can see a shadow right there. If the light was the same as the direction of the girl, would there be a shadow there? What would explain it? You would have to see the object that is casting that shadow if the light is coming from the left side. It's got to be coming from the right side. That is there's something outside the frame of this that is creating that shadow. If the shadow was coming from, if the light was coming from this side of the girl in, again, you have to hit subject before you get shadow. So there would have to be something in here that was casting this shadow. There is nothing here that's casting that shadow. So I have a mismatch of direction. We need to flip the girl or the background. I'm going to flip the girl. Select the body, just select the whole group, come up to the edit menu, down to transform, down to transform, down to flip horizontal. And already we're better off. Say what? That's because you're used to the way it looked before. Wait till we get through the whole composite and then you decide. Again, she has not been matched luminosity. She has not been matched with color. She has not been matched with saturation. She has no shadows. So, we need a little work here first. Okay, so I am going to make shadows based on this girl. What kind of shadows would they be? Are they nice, soft shadows like we did with the gradient tool? What? How do you know they're not? Don't you have existing shadow that already exists? Look at this shadow. Is that a not fucking sharp edge shadow? So how can I have this really nice soft shadow on this girl if I've got these really hard shadows in my background? I can't. So she needs to be, the whole gradient trick that I've showed you guys, that's a great way of a down and dirty, softer, overcasty kind of light, whatever, to do shadows, and they're great. They're really believable, but that is not going to fly in this case. It's going to be much more like the thing that I just showed you right here. So that's what we're going to make. So to start the whole process, I need to actually load the selection of this girl. Now, if you hover over the eyeball for the body group, hold down the Option key and click, it'll turn everything else off, which is what I want to do. There's a lot of stuff. If you open up the body group, you're welcome to look inside there. It's a bunch of spill removal, and I'm sure there's some saturation moves in there. Yeah, there's a bunch of shit going on in there. That doesn't concern me at all. I just want to make a selection of just the body group. So to do this, I'm simply going to hover over the body group, hold down the Command key, and click. And hopefully get a selection going, although I can't see right now. I'm not going to get a selection off the group. So I need to make a merged copy of all of this so that I have something to work with to give me a selection. So again, with everything turned off except for this body group, make sure that the body group is active, because I'm going to put the merge stamp version on top of it. Hold down the Command, Option, Shift, and hit the letter E, and it makes a version of the girl that's sitting right on top of it. And then you can turn off the body group. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out, and this is what you should have. It doesn't really look any different, but now I can load this as a selection. Are we all good? Nope. It's perfect time to stop me. And the letter E. What layer do you have selected? First hit Command D to make sure you don't have selection going. Good, and then those two and the letter E. We've got to put this button. That's the button. Alright, so we're going to cheat really quickly. I'm going to show you, you're going to follow my, because I'm going to show these guys what to do if they can't do this as well. Okay. So for some reason, Chloe's is not working. So, okay, well, so this is how you make it work. This is old school, how you used to do it way back when. So I'm going to get rid of my, I'm going to get rid of the one that I made. So this is what you would do. So back to the beginning. Again, I've got the girl. She's the only thing that's visible right here. You've got actually nothing else that's turned on here. You're going to make a duplicate of this image. So come up to the image menu, down to duplicate. And it's going to say, do you want to make it, we're just going to call it 904 copy. And I was going to say, sure, let's just call it that, even though it's already called something similar to that. This is now the image. And again, all of that other stuff is still turned off. So then you can just flatten this image. So again, go up to the layers palette on the menu side. Everybody keeps calling this a hamburger. The hamburger on the right side. Click on that drop-down menu, and you are going to come down to flatten this image. And it's going to say, do you want to discard all the hidden layers? And I'm going to say, yes, I do. And it actually put this thing on white, which is not what I wanted this thing to do. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that part. And I am going to add a blank layer on I take that back. What am I going to do here? I'm going to turn everyone else off. I'm going to turn all the other layers on. So I've got everything on. Actually, I'm going to select everything. So I'm going to select all my other layers. Again, this is in my copy, and I'm going to throw them all away. So I only have the body, and I'm going to turn the body on right now. And this would be another time to try that keyboard shortcut. Let's see if it works. Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. It worked for you that time. Did it work for the rest of you that time? Perfect. Then you're going to take this layer, drag it on top of the original, hold down your Shift key and let go. And now you've got a blank copy that's sitting above the body, and you can throw that copy that you made away. It was just a temporary thing. You don't need to save it. It was just to give us a blank of this image. Is everybody good on this now? All right, I'm going to turn off the body that's down below it. I'm going to load this as a selection, so just hover over this layer, the top layer that we just made, hold down the Command key and click. It loads it as a selection. You can see you've got marching ants. At this stage of the game, just because I can, I'm going to save it. So I'm going to come up to the Select menu, down to Save Selection, and I'm going to call it Body, and say OK. And at this point, I would save my file. Again, I'm just going to come up, Save Menu, down to Save As, and call it whatever you want to call it. I'm going to throw mine in my TOS folder. It's just a good habit to get into. If you scroll up to the very top of your history palette, you should see a timestamp now of this right here. This thing is critical as long as you keep your files open. Even if you run out of your 50 history states, you've got timestamps that you can go back to. So if somewhere in your marathon 8-hour retouching session you realize you have done something wrong, instead of having to start all 8 hours over again, you periodically step back through your timeline one at a time until you get back before the problem that you found too late was created. And so you hopefully do not have to do all of your work again. Did everybody end up with this timestamp? Okay. All right, so I've got a selection actually going here. I'm going to go down now. Again, I can turn on all of my other layers. I'm going to go right underneath. So I'm going to click on the body layer. I'm not going to do this in the body group. I'm going to click on the body group. I'm going to put all my shadows underneath her. She's going to be my new figure. I'm not going to bother. Again, I've made a stamp of all of this. If I was going to transform her or do any of that kind of stuff, I would make a smart object out of her. I don't need to. Well, actually, I'm going to probably do that soon at some point. So we'll look at that. But anyway, I'm going to put down my first shadow layer. So I'm going to click on Add a Layer. So at the bottom of your Layers palette, the little square box with the plus in the middle, click on that. It adds a blank layer, and I'm going to call this Shadow 1. And then I'm just going to fill it with black. Black is now my background color, but to make sure, because I did this the other day, I actually thought I had a white color, and it was not really a pure white. And I used it to actually do a mask, and all of a sudden I could see bleed through, and I was like, oh, you idiot. If you hit the D key by itself, don't add any modifier, it'll default your color, foreground colors to black and white. Black is now my foreground color, so the keyboard shortcut to fill with black is Option Delete. Again, if you can't remember that, come up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and in Fill, select black in the contents drop down, make sure it's in normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and say OK. I've already got mine, so I don't need to do that again. Command D will deselect that, and then if we turn off the body figure, you can see it's just an outline of her in black. Are we good on this part? OK. I'm going to make sure that that shadow number 1 is selected, and I'm going to make a copy of it, Command J. Now I've got 2 versions of it. I'm going to turn the girl back on so I can actually see how this is going to work. So the reason I have 2 of these is that, again, this is going to be a compound shadow. I need one. It's hard to see, certainly on this screen, but if you look on your screen right now, you should see that there's a floor that goes back to that diagonal, and that diagonal is a wall that goes up. And there's space on the floor between the diagonal wall and the girl. So I've got one shadow that goes along that, and then I've got the next shadow that's actually on the back wall. Correct? Okay, I've actually made selections for you. We can actually, we're going to use them in a second. I'm going to start with my shadow number 2 copy. So click on it, make it active, hit the V key to get the move tool, and then we're simply going to drag this and put it on the back wall. And what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to imagine the direction of the light as it comes down across that and hits this. If I did this up here, it would be impossible. Again, this light is coming down like that, and this shadow is up higher. So you need to simply try to put yourself into this scene and say, how would that look if I actually did that part? Where would this part actually go? How could this part actually... I'm going to raise her up a little bit. Now, I might be cheating this a little bit, but one of the things that I can tell you is I'm going to try to get her legs to match up. So I'm going to try to get the legs of the shadow that's on the back wall to match the legs that are on the floor. If I actually bring it down too far and I've got part of her dress and her hand, that means I need to get the legs, the dress, and the hand to all match up. It's a lot more complicated. And it doesn't really give me a more believable vibe anyway. So in my case, I'm feeling pretty good about this. This feels correct to me to actually bring it down on that part. Are you guys going to give me that? Okay. Shoot.
How come when I click the VP, it won't move the shadow too?
Are you selected on Shadow 2? Do you have the auto select button checked at the top in the options bar? Yes, you do. And that means when you click on something, it's just selecting whatever's underneath your cursor. And if there's nothing underneath the cursor, it will select a different layer. Guys, I'm talking about this button right here, this auto select button. It's a great thing to enable if you've got like a ton of layers and you don't know where shit is. You can click on this, and then if you clicked on this shadow, it would actually pick this layer. If you clicked on this body, it would pick that layer, the body layer. If you clicked on the background sky, it would pick this background layer back here. It would auto-select it, but it changes. So if you expect it to, when you select the shadow, to move only the shadow, then you need to make sure that that thing is not turned on. Okay. So this part's working pretty good. I've already made masks for us to work with. So if you scroll down in your channels palette to the very bottom, you'll see that there's a thing called back wall. I'm going to hover over that alpha channel, hold down the command key, and click to load it as a selection. And then I'm going to go back up to my shadow copy number, my shadow 1 copy, and I'm going to simply apply this as a layer mask. And you can see it hides the floor, and I can see the background. So that's where you should be right now. Yep. So I've just got the shadow placed correctly. If you go over to your channels palette, go down to the bottom, the channels palette, go down to the bottom. There's a thing called back wall that's already been made for you. Got it? Yeah. Hover over the thumbnail, don't select it, hover over the thumbnail, hold down the command key and click, loads it as a selection. Then back over to the shadow layer, the shadow 1 copy layer, and simply add it as a layer mask. So now I don't have the shadow going on the floor. Did this work for everyone? Splendid. Now we need to do the second shadow to connect them. This is how we're putting together this double shadow part. Does that make sense? So to do that, click on it, make shadow 1 active. We are going to transform this one. We're not going to move it, we're going to transform it. Command T. Now right now, the anchor point for that shadow is right at her crotch. So if I do anything, if I spin this thing to try to do it, it spins around that point. Well, I can spin it around this point, and then I can move it down, and then I can spin it again, and I can move it down, whatever. A faster, easier way is to simply set the anchor point right at her feet, because that's where the shadow would really be coming from. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to grab the anchor point that's right at her crotch, and I'm going to drop it down right in the middle of her 2 shoes. And now when I rotate this shadow, you can see that it actually moves in the correct way. It's just a faster way to get there. However, I've got a problem right now, and the problem I've got is this. You can see that my transform tools are going outside the edge of my image. I cannot touch those outside of the edge of my image because I am not on the paste board. So I am going to hit the, up in my options bar, the little circle with the slash through it to undo that transform so that I can get to the paste board and do it again there. So the F key once gets me to the paste board, and then again, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Grab the anchor point, put it right down between her 2 feet, right between her 2 shoes. Grab the, just bring your cursor outside of the transform box, click and drag this down. So the first thing that we need to do is think about how this shadow is actually working. Now this shadow is based on what it really would be. I mean, it's a giveaway, but we're getting close, so what can I tell you? Is that the shadow would really be coming more from the side of her. This is a shadow that would be created if the sun was directly at my camera. It would be throwing a shadow right behind her. But you can see because of the light, there's a highlight on her right side, shadow on her left side. This is not what that shadow would ultimately look like. So we need to distort this shadow. This is the hardest thing in the world there is to do, but this is what we are going to do. So my first move is going to be to collapse this. So come up to your edit menu, down to transform, and we are going to distort this. So once you click on the distort button, you can grab any handle and it will move independent of any other. So I'm going to grab the handle that's sitting on the very top, and I'm going to hold down my option key. What I'm trying to do is compress her legs together. So did I ever tell you about when I was shooting it? It's just the reason I feel about the press the way I feel about the press. I was shooting for Playboy years ago, and they sent me to Canada to do a search for the it was either the 30 or the 35th anniversary Playmate. And so I spent 2 months in Canada going from one side to the other. And it was all about PR and trying to gin up as many people as I could see while we were there. So we were doing TV spots, we were doing every afternoon show, every morning show, everything about hyping this up to trying to get turnout for this. Anyway, then basically I would do these interviews, and there was nothing racy about them. And a girl would show up, she would fill out a form, she had on a bathing suit, she would stand up in a hotel room, I would take a bunch of Polaroids of her in a bathing suit, whatever, and then she would split. So there was a reporter in Vancouver from the Vancouver, whatever the big paper in Vancouver is, who showed up, and he said, could I watch you do one of your interviews? And I said, of course. And so we go into this, girl goes in the bathroom, changes out of her clothes into the bathing suit, she comes back in, whatever. She stands in front of, again, it was just supposed to be in front of like a gray wall, just, it was like almost like mugshot stuff, right? So I say to her, can you move your feet just a little further apart and twist your shoulders? And she goes, okay. So I shoot the Polaroids, whatever, and again, I know how to make people look as good as I can. Anyway, and that was it. End of story. The guy leaves. The next day in the paper, Engelhard commands girl to spread her legs. Yep. Anyway, I'm hoping now that if I hold down the option key and I grab this one handle, that it's also going to move the other one. But I know that works in scaling. I'm not sure if it works in distorting. We'll find out right now. It does. So I'm going to crush her legs together. And then I'm going to compress them also as well. I'm trying to, again, get them so that they kind of line up with the legs that are on the background. So I'm going to pull this in. I'm going to rotate it down a little bit more. And I get kind of close. And that's really all I'm trying to do. Again, I don't want her skirt to like fall into this. I'm hoping that that doesn't really become too much of a part of it. But at this, sorry guys. I know, no, this screen's horrible. So I can't on the, well, maybe I can. I take that back. How's that? Okay. Next time, just shout out. So at this stage of the game, I can just tell you from my own experience, the best of the transform tools that you can use is the warp tool. So to get to that, you can go to the little icon that's up in your options bar that looks like, again, it looks like a net for some racket game or so. I don't really know what that looks like. Anyway, that's the one thing you can click on, or you can, again, go back to the edit menu to transform and down to warp. And what will happen is that it's going to put a grid on top of our image right now. And every single one of these little blue points that you see is a control point. So it will allow me to really warp this and manipulate it. I'm not constricted to just shrinking stuff in, pulling stuff apart, pushing stuff together, stretching stuff out, stretching stuff in. I can really manipulate this thing, which is what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to zoom in on this. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get her outside of this one leg to line up with the outside of the other leg. The problem that I've got right now, though, is I can't really see where the two interact, right? So I'm going to change that. I'm going to hit the cancel out of here. So again, I'm going to hit the little circle with the slash through it. I'm going to cancel this. Instead, before I do this warp, I'm going to put the layer mask on it. So to do that, I don't have to go back to my channels palette. I can simply go to the mask that is on the layer right above it right now, which is a mask for the back wall. But the inversion of this mask on the back wall will be the floor and the sky and everything else. So I'm just going to hover over the mask of the thumbnail of the mask on the shadow copy layer, hold down my command key and click and load that as a selection. Then I'm going to come down to the layer that I'm actually trying to change right now, the shadow 1. I'm going to add that as a layer mask, but now I need to invert it because otherwise it's just going to add this to the girl on the back wall, and that's not what I want. So with the mask selected, Command I, and then the most important part, I want to transform the girl, but I do not want to transform the mask. So there is a link between here for you guys in the back. There is a link right here between the layer mask and the figure. I'm going to uncheck that link. And then finally, I'm going to select the girl to actually be able to manipulate her. Are we good on this? No, that's okay. Just go back in history to when you added your first mask.
Yeah, no, I fixed it. I just didn't get any of that.
Okay, no. So I'm going to go back there with you. So we're going to go back to, I think, the very first add layer mask. Yeah, so I've got nothing. I've got just the regular background. Are you that far back?
No, I was able to go back and fix it, but I just didn't get rid of it just
Okay.
because I was.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to just get rid of this mask. So basically, sorry. Sorry, it's no longer there. Okay, so basically you've got the background with the girl on the wall masked, and then you've got another version of her sitting behind the guy with nothing, right? Okay, so I'm going to simply load the mask that's right above it. Command click to load it, and then add it as a layer mask on the one underneath it. The problem I have right now, though, is it's the same exact mask as the one above it. I want it to show everything else. So you need to invert the mask, Command I, and it should look like this. And you can see the floor is actually showing, so she'll show up on the floor, right? But now I want to transform the girl. I want to actually distort her and do all that stuff, but I don't want to distort the mask. If I just go into transform right now, it will do both. It will distort her, but it'll distort the mask too. So if you click on the link between the mask and the girl and turn it off, now you can change them separately. I can only modify the mask, or I can only modify the girl, either one, but they're separate. So now I'm going to select the girl, and now we should be good to go. Is everybody else on board? No, this is important. This is how I would hope this whole class would have always been and will be, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so anyway, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Command, again, I'm going to zip out a little bit just so that I can see what's going on here. So make sure that you've got the pixel content of that shadow selected, so the borders around the pixel content, not the mask. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Drop the anchor point from her crotch down to right between her toes. I'm going to zip back out just a little bit more so that I can get to the top of this. Grab it and drag it across, and you can see now she doesn't show up on the background, but you can see where her legs are actually showing up down at the bottom part. Correct? This is exactly what we want to have happen here. So I'm going to do some manipulation down there first, like what I did before. Again, I'm going to come up to the edit menu, down to transform, down to distort. I'm going to click on the top handle, the one that's about in the middle of her waist now on my shadow. Yours might be different, but I'm going to hold down the the option key, because what I want to do is bring these two handles together. If I click and just drag this one down like this, well, here, I'll show you. If I click and just drag this down, it moves, but the other one doesn't. I want them to kind of move together to bring her legs more together. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to hold down the Option key and watch what happens to these handles. They will both move. And so then I can actually, again, twist this around a little bit more. This is why I'm now on the pasteboard, because I want to continue to rotate this, but I have to be out on this edge back out here to even begin to rotate this part. And I'm not getting the rotating handles, which is pissing me off. So I'm actually going to just grab this thing in the middle part here. I'm going to rotate this handle, and what you can see what I'm trying to do is sort of line up this leg right here with this leg right here. I'm trying to complete the shadow in a way that would be believable to me. Does that make sense? But what I have found is that every time you move one thing, you end up moving other things as well. And it ends up being this just constant iteration back and forth and back and forth. If you simply go to the warp transform, it gives you a whole lot more control. So that's where I'm going to go now. Again, I don't have to commit this. I'm simply going to come up to the edit menu, or up to the little icon at the top that, again, looks to me sort of like a very small racket net, or to the edit menu, down to transform, and down to warp. Either one. It puts a grid on your image, and now you've got all of these little points on this grid. All those little blue dots are individual handles that will allow you to manipulate the image. So I'm going to click on the one that's near her hand shadow that's hanging down, and I'm simply going to start dragging this over, and I'm going to grab other ones and start to drag them over to see if I can't get this leg that's on the side over here to match up with her other leg. So I'm going to pull this one in as well. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Can you see that now? Let me reset this really quickly so it's not in my way. Okay, so I'm working with the handles down here now, and I can bring the leg in a little bit here. I've got to stretch it out a little bit more. So again, there's no, I can't tell you exactly how to do every part that's actually in here, but this is what I'm trying to go after. So I'm actually going to grab this part and pull it in more. And grab this and pull this in more. So I'm just looking to get the outsides. I can fake the insides. I'm just trying to get the outsides to line up. And you can see that in my case right now, I'm almost there actually. I've got the outside of one leg that's happening. So the left side of my image is actually lining up, and the right side of my image is lining up. Now I've got a problem in the middle. I'm okay with that. I can fix the problem that's in the middle. But this is sort of where I'm at right now. I'm going to zip back out and take a look at this. And you can see that it's not on her feet where it really should be. The shadow is now pretty much in front of her. So that's not going to work. I need to click and push this whole thing up. But this is the advantage of using warp. Typically when you use warp, it's actually changed my shadow back on the other side a little bit more. So it's this sort of iteration going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And I've got a weird shape that's happening in the back right now, but it looks like a really fine small little leg. But I'm going to fix that in just a second. But now I feel like if I take a look at the shadow coming off of her feet, it needs a little cleanup because a little bit of the shadow is in front of her shoes, which cannot be. There's nothing to cause a shadow in front of her shoes. There can be shadow under her shoes, and there can be shadow falling behind her or to the side of her, but there can never be something that's in front of her if the light's in front of her. If there is a shadow in front of her, the only thing that can explain that is a backlight. Is this sort of working for you guys? Sort of? Okay, it's a challenge. I get that part. But I'm now looking at the ribbing on the shoes, and do they match up with the ribbing on here? I do like the one leg in front. That one is actually doing me pretty well. The other leg, I'm not so wild about, but again, I'm going to fix this. But as I take a zoom in and look, I've got the outside edge of this one that's matched up. I've got the outside of the other one that's also matched up. I'm feeling pretty good about this part, so I'm going to go ahead and commit this transform. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. So now I've got an issue. And my issue is this. I have got too much leg on the left side right here, and I don't have enough leg on the right side over here. I am now going to fix that by merging both of these together. I'm going to put together the shadow that's on the back wall, and I'm going to put together the shadow on the front wall. I'm going to put those two together so that I can edit this entire thing in one swoop. Does that make sense? All right, so to do that, just hold down the option key and click on either shadow. I'm just going to click on the one that's on the top. You can see it turns it off. It turns everything else off, and then I'm going to click on the one that's underneath it. So now the only thing that is showing on in my image are the two layers that are the shadow, and other than that, she's on a transparent background. It's just the shadows. Everybody good on this? All right. I'm going to select the top shadow layer, and hopefully, Chloe, this is going to work with your computer. We are going to hold down Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E to do a merge stamp version of both of those layers into one. Perfect. It had to be, maybe it's Smart Object something, that I don't know what it was, but it's working now. Did this work for everyone? Okay, you can turn off the 2 layers that actually created this shadow. We don't need to turn anything back on right now. We just need to fix what we've got going on in here. So if you zoom in, the first thing that you can see is on this layer, there's a small division between the shadow layer on the floor and the shadow layer on the background. You can see it's a really thin line. That really thin line is the width of the selection marching ants that we just made. Remember, we had a selection and we just inverted it. This is the line that represents that. So I need to fix that right away. I am going to go to a tablet at this point. Not that you need to, but I'm going to. You'll notice I've not turned this into a smart object yet. I'm going to get to that, but you cannot paint or do any destructive work on a smart object, and I need to do destructive work on this. Are we good? All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is just hit a B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it an extremely small brush. I'm going to go up to my options menu, click on the drop down, 100% hard brush. You do not want to overspray any of this. You want perfect control, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and 100% flow. Again, hit the D key just to make sure that your foreground and background colors are defaulted black and white. If black is your foreground color, you're good to go. If white is your foreground color, simply hit the X key to actually paint that out. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller just so that I can get this edge, and I'm simply going to click and paint that line away. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I need to extend. I'm going to start with the leg that's on the one that's too big. I'm going to actually start on this part. So I need to narrow this whole leg down as much as I possibly can. Now it's conceivable, I've never tried this, but I'm going to try it right now. So it's conceivable that we could continue to transform this part. So to see if that's indeed true, I'm going to grab the lasso key, the L key, and I'm going to select just this lower part of this leg. And again, I'm going to hit Command T to transform it. And I'm going to click on the warp icon to put the grid on it. And I'm going to see if I can't push just that leg part in. And it's working a little bit for me. It's actually making my job a little less onerous. Yeah, that feels a little bit better to me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. It just saved us some work. It's still wonky, but nonetheless. Command D to deselect. Yeah. Did you go up to the, did you click? No, it's not trying to, it shouldn't be the selection. You're not transforming the selection, you're transforming the image. Yeah. Okay, then I'm going to undo this. Gwen. Okay, where are you? Here, let me see really quick. Hang on. I've got a great idea. Let's take a quick break. Let's let everybody catch up. I've got 3:15, really not, it's 3:16, but 3:15. Let's make it a hard 10 back at 3:25. And anybody who's not quite caught up on this, we will get caught up right now. Okay, so mistakenly, I tried to then retransform this again, which just caused a world of problems for everyone. So I'm going to undo that part, and go back and show you the way that I used to always do it, so which will be just faster. So I'm going to go back in time before I selected that. This is just where we're at. So you can have places where stuff is meeting up, like in my case, the outside, both of the outsides of the shadows are actually meeting up. The insides are completely off. I don't have enough on this one side, and I got too much on the other side. So I'm going to fix this with the pen tool. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because I've got to try to figure out the shape of this leg. So what I know about the shape, I'm working now on my left leg. Again, yours is going to be different than mine, so you just need to watch what I do and then adapt it to the specific problems that you have with your leg. So for me right now, this leg, it's way too wide. So what I want to do though, I don't want to just do a straight line from the leg somewhere down here. I want to put some shape into it so that it looks natural, so that it is somewhat believable. So just watch my screen. I'm going to show you how I do this. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. I'm going to zoom in because I really want to get the intersection of these two shadows, and I'm going to click and put a point down right there. Then I'm going to come across, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to come down here. I want to put a little bit of bend in this. You just don't want to do a straight line. It looks too artificial. So I'm going to come down sort of where it's beginning to hit to the bend of her knee. I'm going to click, drag out, and put in a bend. Now remember, the more you drag your lines out, the more they're going to affect the area that's up closer to to my inception point. And this point is I'm going down to now. So if you stay a really short lines, then your control happens much closer to the area where my cursor is right now. So I'm going to drag out a really long line so that I'm actually just shifting the shape up at the top just a slight bit to put a little bit of curve up here in the top. Then I'm going to come back to my control point, hover over it, hold down the Option key, click to get rid of my second control handle. Again, this is exactly what we did with the Coca-Cola stuff, with the Verizon stuff, with all the outlining the girl on metal, it's all the same moves here. Now I want to come back up, and I'm going to click just in the middle of my screen. I just need to complete my selection. I don't want to do it inside her leg though, because then I'll be modifying the inside of her leg. This part of her leg is fine. I'm just trying to get rid of this other part. So I'm simply going to put a control point up here, another one here, another one here, another one here, and then back to home. And just click. So it's just this weird selection part that I have going. Then I'm going to come back to my path palette. I'm not even going to save this because this is going to be a destructive move. Once I kill that part of her leg, I don't need the path anymore, so I'm just going to leave it as work path. I'm going to hover over the work path thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click. It loads it as a selection. I now have marching ants. I'm going to go back to my layers palette. I am working on this top layer, the composite of my shadow layers. I'm just going to hit the delete key, Command D to deselect. I just got rid of it. That's all I was doing. Now, you guys already know that usually when I use the pen tool to do work like this, I would actually feather the selection once I made it. But in this case, I don't need to feather it because I'm going to blur all of these edges anyway. So I've got the first leg in shape. It feels better for me the way I like it. The next one I actually need to do the opposite. I actually need to add shadow to it. So again, with the pen tool selected, I'm going to zoom in at the intersection point that I'm clicking on to start. Then I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to try to imagine the shape of this leg. So I'm going to come down here pretty far down into here, into the lower part of her leg. I'm going to click and then pull out and make this considerably wider. And now in this case, I'm not trying to get rid of leg, I'm trying to add leg. So I'm going to hover over the center point again, hold down my Option key, click to get rid of the second point, and then I'm just going to work my way up inside the leg, because again, I'm just going to be adding black to this, and then I'm going to finish my point. So now when I load this as a selection, that area of transparency is going to get filled with black. Is this making sense to everyone what's going on here? So then again, to my path palette, Command click to load this as a selection, go back to my layers palette, still working on this composite shadow layer. I need to fill this with black. Black is my foreground color, Option Delete fills it, Command D to deselect. Now, this looks a little fakey to me, but that's okay because I've actually got to put these legs even more together than they are right now, or I've got to fill that space in. So I'm going to zip back out and take a look at what I've got going here. The way her legs are, I could actually and probably should have continued that shadow all the way down. So I'm going to redo mine just so that we can go through the process one more time. I wasn't looking at the totality of it. I want to bring this down so that it actually joins the other leg and so that it just becomes solid black. I don't want any space between them. That would not be possible given where the light is and where her legs are. So I'm simply going to go back in time before I put down that last path. I am going to start, hang on one second. Okay, I've got my first point up here. I'm just going to collide into the other leg right here. I'm going to work my way down pretty far, and then I'm going to just put a little shape into it, just so that it bends slightly, so that it looks something. I'm going to kick my line way out so that I get a little bit more bend that happens up sort of closer to the shadow that's actually on the wall. And I'm going to accept that. I'm going to hold down my control key and click to get rid of that other point. And then I'm just going to work my way up the leg. Again, it's all going to be solid in here. It's going to be a much bigger leg. And finish my selection. So everybody sees this. And we'll see how it looks. I'm going to go to my path palette, hold down the command key, click, load it as a selection. Back onto my layers palette, and again fill this with black. Black is my foreground color, Option Delete, Command D to deselect. Could I have a little more shape in this leg? I feel like I could. I feel like it's a little too strong. I'm going to zip back out. It's not the worst thing in the world, though, to be perfectly honest with you. You can go in and continue to work with this. So if I wanted to put just a little bit more shape in her leg, I'm simply going to click on that same point again, come out and click another point down here and actually bump my line out just a little bit, and then again come back all the way around, complete my selection, go to my path palette, command click to load that as a selection, go back to my layers palette and fill that with black, Option Delete, Command D to deselect. It just puts a little more organic in it. You'll see what you're trying to do in all of this is avoid straight lines. The shadows, everybody, again, this goes back to our whole conversation that we had about when people first approach photographs, people have a preconceived tendency to believe they are true. And we're going to leverage that to death with this. So, are we good on this part? Do you have kind of a shadow that you feel like might work, sort of? Yes. It doesn't have to be. It's how you look at it and feel. So what I do at this stage of the game, I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out. I'm going to turn everything back on and say, do I believe this? So I'm going to turn on my background. I'm going to turn everything back on here. And just looking at this right off the bat, do I believe this? Sure. Why not? Right? If I feel like that the legs collided a little too quickly, like right here, if I feel like this came together a little too fast, I can go in here and I could actually thin it out. I would just, again, use the pen tool and take a little bit of it out. And here, I'll show you what I do. P key to get the pen tool. Again, let me zip up so you guys can see this. I'm going to click on this part right here, and we'll just click and pull it down a little bit more. And then I will just come back up here like this. No, I take that back, not there. I'm going to come back up right through this part and reconnect here. And then again, working on my shadow layer right here, just command click to load that as a selection, and then just delete it. And then Command D. So then you can use your history to go back and forth. I'm going to zip back out, and I'll just go back before I actually did that part, before I did the clear part. I want to go back and see what it looked like before I did anything. So that's what it looked like there. This is what it looks like now. I like the one that I had better to begin with, so I'm just going to go back to that. Make sense? Okay. So at this stage of the game, a couple other things I want to take care of really quickly. If you zip into her feet, you can see that I do have a little bit of a shadow that's right underneath one of her shoes, and it's beginning to travel underneath the other one. Again, yours is going to be completely different than mine, so you've got to look at my screen. You just need to understand where I'm going. This is where you have contact shadow, though, are her shoes. So I need to add just a little bit of shadow right underneath this. Now, I could do it with a pen tool, or I can do it with just a brush. So I'm going to try it with just a brush. I'm going to hit the B key. I still have a completely hard brush, because, again, this is contact shadow, so it's going to be completely hard. 100% normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Remember, I'm painting underneath the figure, so you're never going to see this. And I'm simply going to click and extend that shadow underneath that foot slightly. And see, that's why I don't paint shadows. It looks horrible. Command Z to undo that. Try again. Perfect. So now I've got my shadow exactly where I want it. I'm going to double click on this thing and call it Shadow Final. Typically what I do at this point too is just to keep things to a dull roar. I'm going to select all of my shadows. So I've just named this Shadow Final. It's the top one. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and go down and select the other two. They're not on. I'm never probably going to turn them on ever again, but I want to have what I took to build this thing, so if I need to go back and rebuild it, I haven't lost those things. But I want to clean this up a little bit so that I'm not looking at 3 layers. I just want to look at one. So with all 3 of those layers selected, up to the little hamburger, across from to the right of the layers palette, click on the drop down menu and say new group from layers. The reason I do this is that this will open up a dialog box and allow you to name it, and I'm going to call it shadows. I'm going to open up shadows because I still need to work on this final one. It's the only one that's visible, but now I need to actually convert this to a smart object. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So to do that, I'm going to go up to the layer menu and I'm going to come down to smart objects and convert this to a smart object. The reason I want to do this is that you remember when we were looking at the shadow demo that I was showing up here, shadows as they move from the contact shadow to a back wall, or as they move further away from the subject that is casting it, they get softer and they fade. I need to do both of those for this. I need to get softer and I need to fade. So the reason I turn this into a smart object is I'm going to use the smart filter on this to blur it, but then that smart filter has a smart filter mask which will allow me to control the fade, or the contact shadow, which should be incredibly sharp, to the back wall, which should be the softest of them all. So to do that, I'm going to actually, the one that I use, and guys, you can use a million of them. I don't find Gaussian blur to be especially believable for shadows. Now it's going to be pretty subtle. I've always had more luck with motion blur, so that's the one that I'm going to use. But again, I can suggest this to you, but that doesn't mean it's the law. It doesn't mean that you have to always use motion blur. If you find that Gaussian blur actually works better, then use Gaussian blur. If you find that a combination of both works better, then do that. So anyway, that's all I can tell you. So to do this, I'm going to come up to the filter menu. Again, I'm still working on my shadow final, the smart object, up to the filter menu, down to blur, and down to motion blur. Now, when you do motion blur has strength and axis. So what axis means, if you look at the little wheel, the angle wheel there, what this means is that this controls the direction of the blur. I want my blur to be horizontal across her body. I do not want it to be vertical along the lines of her body. You can see what I mean by this. If you grab that little wheel and turn it so that the line of the little wheel crosses her body, you can see I get softening on all of the sides. I don't, if you go up to the top of her head, get a lot of blurring that goes right out the very top. If you don't see a lot of blur, just grab your distance. You can really crank the shit out of this, and you will see this is now the direction of the blur. If you take your little wheel and change it, you'll see that it changes the direction of the blur. I typically try to do this so it goes across a body. So in my case, I'm feeling like this 23 degrees, if you want the same one that I've got, seems about right. But it's way too much blur. So I need to back this off, and what I'm trying to figure out now is how soft does the wall need to be? The wall is the furthest thing away. It should have the most blur in it. The area by her feet should have no blur at all. Those are contact shadows. So you need to decide on this background, how soft does this thing need to be? So for me, I temporarily hold down this space bar so that I can get the hand, so that I can move it over and look at the edge of the real shadow over here. This is what I'm trying to mimic. This is the edge I'm trying to mimic, and you can see it's pretty damn sharp. So then when I come back over to this figure, I'm thinking to myself, okay, 23 seems too extreme to me. So I'm going to zip it back down to like a 15, 16, 17. That seems better for me. But remember, it's a smart object. Even though we say okay right now, we can always go right back in because it's a smart filter. We can go back in and change it anytime we want. We can save this file and 10 years from now, open it up and change this value. Correct? All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and say, again, if you want the same thing that I've got, I had an angle of 23, a distance of 17 pixels, I'm gonna say okay to that. So now I've got my motion blur on my smart object, but you can see this motion blur is indeed a smart filter, and it has a smart filter mask. That's what this big thing is right here. So I need to control the blur so that the background wall has all of the blur on it, but the foreground by her feet doesn't have any of it on it. And I'm just going to do it using a gradient. So if you click on the smart filter mask to make it active, hit the G key to get the gradient tool, or come over to your toolbar, right in the middle, select the gradient tool. Again, at the very top in your options bar at the drop-down menu, select Classic Gradient for right now. In the little icon next to it that shows the type of gradient, click on that to get the drop-down menu. Sorry, that's not, oh yeah, mine flew out. Open up the basic presets, and you're going to select the very first one. You're going to go from black to white, or in this case it's foreground to background color, but that's basically what I want in here, and say okay. And then finally you need to make sure that this is a linear gradient, not a circular gradient. So it's of the 5 types of gradient icons at the top, it's the one to the far left that is just a linear gradient. Now, you don't need to worry about how you pull this gradient because you can do them over and over and over. When we're going to pull one, and if you think, well, that's wrong, you simply pull another one, and it will completely overwrite the first one that you did. So it's not like there's nothing cumulative about this. So I'm going to, so the way the gradient is right now, I'm hoping it goes foreground to background, but we're going to find out. Foreground would be black to white, which is what I want. I want my mask near her feet to be black so that it hides the blur, and then by the time I reach the background wall, it has become white to allow all of the blur to show up on the background wall. So I'm simply going to click right here by her toe. Sorry, hang on, I'm going to zoom it up so that people in the back can see. So I'm going to click right here by her feet. I'm going to click, and you don't want to drag up into the back wall because it'll throw it up in there, but you just want to come back to like the middle of her thigh and let go. And you can see the area by her feet got real sharp, but the area in the background is still soft. My feeling in the one that I just pulled is that it stays sharp too long. So instead of starting at the edge of her toe right here, I'm going to start all the way over at the other side of her foot, the right side of her foot, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm not going to go as far. I'm not going to go up into the middle of her thigh. I'm going to go to the area that's just about where her legs start to divide. and that feels much better to me. So if you want to take a look at your gradient, hold down the Option key and click, and you can see this is where it is. This is what it's actually doing. It's actually this area that's dark is hiding the blur, but the area that's white back here is showing the blur. So I have emulated that whole idea of shadow that starts sharp and then gets softer as we go back. Whew. Did this work for everyone? All right, good job. So now we actually need to make this thing work. We are really close, guys. So to finally trick this out in the way that we need to, this shadow clearly is too strong. So what a lot of people will do is they will select this shadow layer and they will simply drop the opacity of this, and they'll crank it back like this. The problem with this is that that's not how a shadow really works. The way a shadow really works is that it suppresses the highlights and works you down. Something that is a highlight, it pushes it down into a mid-tone or a 3/4 tone, or if it's a really hard light, it'll push it all the way down almost to a black tone. That is not what opacity is doing. What opacity is doing is it's just saying, I'm going to overlay a gray on this entire thing. That is not how shadows work. We need to emulate the way a shadow works. But we've gone through all of this process to build the mask that we need to use to then pull the highlights down and leave the shadows in place. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to crank the opacity all the way back up again. To start this whole process, I'm going to load this smart object as a selection. So Command click to load this as a selection. You can see I've got marching ants going on around my figure in the background. I'm still in my shadow group because what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put a curve on here that is going to create shadows, so it should stay in the shadow group. So I'm simply going to come down to my adjustment layer, the circle at the bottom of the layers palette that is half black and half white. Click on it and we are going to add a curve. Now when you do that, you can see it puts on a curve with a mask built in, and this mask has all the properties that that layer that smart object had. It has the softness, the gradient part, it has all of that part is built into this. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So to use this, I need to match the existing shadow exactly. Now you can see that I have actually, in my case, I've already got two shadow points, two color sampler tool marker points that are down. I'm going to get rid of these and start from scratch. So to do that, I'm going to come over to the eyedropper tool in my toolbar. I'm going to click on it and come down to the color sampler tool. Make sure that it is set to a 3x3 average. I realized that the other day we had bumped ours up to an 11x11 when we were trying to clean out a background, and I kept getting these weird readings. And I looked up and it was like, oh, of course, you've left it at 11x11. Go back to a 3x3, hit the clear all button to get brand new ones. So I just want to start from scratch. And then typically what I do is you put your first color sampler point where the problem is, or where the thing is that you want to change. I want to change this shadow that's right on her. So I'm going to click right in the middle of her body on that background wall. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to put another color sampler point. Can you guys in the back? Sorry, I keep ignoring you. So first point right in the middle of her body, of the shadow. Second point right back here on the wall, on that sort of like, I avoid this like top part, I avoid the floor right on this wall because it's basically the same plane as what I'm trying to change right now. So I'm going to click on that part and we should be good to go. Has everybody got their two sampler points down? Are we all good? Okay. So now if you take a look up at your info palette, you can see that the first one's reading all black, which is what it should be reading, and the second one has got, it's not an even color. If you'll see this, it's a 157 red, 152 green, and 148 blue. What that is telling me is that it is dominated by red and yellow in here. That's the color that this shadow really is. However, I want to create the exact duplicate of this shadow. So to do this, you can now turn off your smart object shadow. You will not be able to see anything anymore because the curve has not changed anything yet. You will see it's reading now 243s all the way along the line. My 157 is the highest of the numbers. The reason I do the one I want to change first and then the other one is that means the two sets of numbers that are in the middle need to match each other. So this 243 in my red needs to be a 157. I'm going to do it I'm not going to bother to go in and do it with the red channel yet. I'm just going to do it with the overall. I'm going to bring everybody down. So I'm simply going to click on the highlight point of my curve and start to bring it down. And this is how shadows really do work. So I'm dragging it down until I get a red reading of in my red channel to read 157. It reads 157. Now, again, this is not a neutral color. This is a colored shadow. Right now, it's perfectly neutral, the one I have on the background. I need to fix that. So I'm going to go to my green channel in the drop-down menu of my curve. Because my green is a 157, it needs to be a 152. I'm simply going to grab that highlight slider, highlight point up at the very top, and drag it down till I get a green reading of my shadow of a 152. So now the green matches the real shadow. And then finally, I'm going to do the same thing with my blue. And I'm going to grab that top part and drag it down to my blue channel reads 148. So again, my shadow, which is under my points number 1, is a 157 for the red channel, a 152 for the blue channel, and a 148 for the green channel, for the blue channel. So they are all matching. And take a look at that shadow. What a difference that makes, right? Turn on your smart object again, you can see that that's not a real shadow, that's a real shadow. Is this working for everyone? Okay, finally, we gild the lily. So select the very top layer that is the body. I'm going to turn this body into a smart object because I want to run my check layers now to make sure that I'm adjusting everything. And if I need to open up the contrast, which I feel like I'm probably going to have to do, that is going to be, again, shadows and highlights, which is a smart filter. And you can't use it, if you use it on this image as it is right now, without it being a smart object, it is a destructive move. That's not what we want. So make sure that the top layer is selected. And I'm going to go up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert this to a smart object. It is now a smart object. Then I'm going to go to my actions palette, and I'm going to find my check layers action, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to run it. And you can see that it actually does really weird shit to my image, but that's indeed, so it's trying to match the color part first. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to start with my luminosity check layer. So I'm going to turn my luminosity check layer on, and is everybody with me? Okay, so when I look at this image right off the bat, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about the space that it's in. And the space that it's in is a really bright sunny day. Does this girl look like she's in a really bright sunny spot? Not at all. So my first move in here is exposure. It's not contrast yet. It might be, but right now it's exposure. But because I have a smart object now, I can use the camera raw. So some people will try to put a curve on this. Don't put a curve on this because a curve on this can't really emulate exposure. Exposure is a lifting of the entire dynamic range. You lift the highlights, but you also lift the midtones and you also lift the shadows. You can do that with a curve kind of, but not really. You can do it in camera raw though in spades. Because we now have a smart object, we can actually run smart filters, and the one I'm going to run up to the filter menu down to, sorry, go back, you need to go back and select the body so that we can run this smart filter on it, up to the filter menu down to camera raw filter. And in the camera raw filter, when it opens up, it just shows you, you don't get the black and white version of it anymore. I'm simply going to add a half a stop to this and see what it looks like. Again, we're just guessing now. I'm going to add a half a stop. If it looks like it's enough, great. If it doesn't look like it's enough, I will come back in and add more. If it looks like it's too much, I'll come back in and back it off. But I'm just going to try and pump it up a half a stop. So I'm going to add a 0.5 to that. I don't know why it doesn't ever give you, like, I can never get a 0.50 unless I type it in. It's always 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm going to say okay to this. Feels better, but I actually think it could be hit harder. Don't you? right? So again, because this is a smart filter now, it was the camera raw filter, simply double click on it to go back into it. And let's add another third of a stop. So I'm going to take it up to like a 0.8 and say okay. Feels better, feels like she's more in this space. Now I'm going to turn I'm going to turn off my luminosity check layer just to make sure. Did I push this a little too hard? Possibly. I think looking at this now, it's maybe a little bit too hard. So again, I'm going to go right back down to my camera raw filter, double click on it, and I'm going to pull it back down. The 0.55 I thought was too little, so I'm going to pull it down to a 0.65 and see how I feel about that. What do you guys think? It still seem a little hot? Turn on your luminosity check layer again. That's pretty damn close. I'm going to leave it here. We need to do color and saturation and see where those things ultimately go, and then we can decide about all this. So I'm going to come back up and I'm going to do color next. So I'm going to turn on my color check layers. And again, things should be wild. In my color check layer, though, I've got the color check layer. I've just got the saturation on. I don't have the color check layer on. So this is now what mine looks like in this whole scenario. And you can see that the girl appears to be considerably warmer than the majority of the background. So I think I just need to pull a slight amount part of that off. We're going to see. So I'm, what? It's saturation. Oh, turn your luminosity check layer off. Yeah. Guys, it gets easier. The more you do this, the easier this gets. I realize that I am throwing so much at you, but that is, I have argued this, and I will argue this to my grave. There's not a single person in here who is not capable of doing all of this stuff, and I firmly believe that. It's just a question of how much time I can spend with you to show it to you, and how much time you practice it. That's all it is. The concepts are not beyond anyone. Unlike my intro to calculus class in my freshman year of college when I wanted to be a doctor, and I walk into the class and my instructor only speaks Chinese. And they say, well, that shouldn't be a problem because we're only dealing with numbers and numbers are universal. I failed calculus. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to go back down to my figure. I'm going to click on my figure to make it active because, again, I need to put my adjustment layer on top of the figure so that I can clip it to the figure so that I'm only controlling the color of my figure and not the color of my background. However, that being said, I could change my tact on this. I could go back in and I can actually put a curve on there to change the color of the background to match the girl. But I deliberately did this to get that stupid blue sky, and I don't want to go in and change that. So I'm going to change the color of the girl instead. So anyway, the girl is now active. I'm going to click on adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a color balance. Immediately change the blending mode of that adjustment layer from normal all the way down to color so that the only thing that we are shifting here is color. And then finally, I need to clip this layer to the girl. So if you look at the properties panel, there is a little icon at the bottom of that properties palette that looks like a square with a little arrow. I always say the arrow is going counterclockwise. If you click on that, that will actually clip it. You'll see that when you do that, your adjustment layer slides slightly to the right, and then you get another little icon with an arrow that's pointing down. And what that says, if you come up and just grab the blue slider and just really crank it back and forth, what you can see is this is how you restrict those motions to only impacting the girl and not the background. It's been clipped to that. The other way to do clipping is to hover your cursor between the two layers. So I've got my cursor is hovered right now between my adjustment layer and the girl, and if you hold down your option key, you get that same little symbol, the square with the counterclockwise arrow. If you click on that, it'll unclip it. If you click on it, it'll clip it back again. But we do want to leave this clipped in. Now in my case, with all the blue sky around here, if I start to crank towards the blue, I feel like it's pushing it a little bit closer to what's happening in the background part right here. I also feel like I have too much red in here. That actually might be a bigger problem. So I'm going to actually change my cyan. And you can see as I start to pull the cyan away, it's actually really screwing up her face. So I'm not really sure at this stage of the game if this color is what my real issue is. I'm going to suspect it isn't. So I'm going to neutralize this back out. I'm going to push it a little bit to the blue, but that's going to be about it. So maybe a +4 in the blue. I'll see. I'm going to turn off my color check layers. The thing that this is making me feel like is that the problem in this is saturation. But with it turned off, I can now turn on and off my color correction layer and zoom into this a little bit, and it sucked out a little bit of the warmth of her. Again, it's not, the sun is pretty high in the sky. It's not a low, the sun isn't like low in the afternoon. So the fact that I've pulled a little bit of the warmth out of here, it's incredibly subtle. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it, but I am going to run my saturation check layer. So I'm going to click on that guy, and again, in the saturation check layer, you can see she looks slightly, again, we're looking at skin tones now. The reason that the background is black is because it has this 0 saturation. Again, the way the saturation check layer works is the darker it is, the darker your elements are, the less saturation you have, the lighter your elements are, the more saturation you have. So you can see the most saturated part of my image is the sky in the background. But I want the girl to match sort of more the space that she's in a little bit better. So I'm also going to drop the saturation slightly. So I'm going to go back to my color adjustment layer because I need to add, again, all of my adjustment layers need to be stacked on top of one another so that they all are clipped back to the original image. So I'm going to add an adjustment layer to this. So click on the adjustment layer. We are going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. I'm going to immediately change the blending mode from normal down to down to saturation, and then again I'm going to hover between my 2 adjustment layers right now, hold down the option key, my cursor turns into that little box with the arrow, click to clip it, and now I can simply grab my saturation and I'm going to actually pull it back a little bit, and you'll see her face is going to get a little bit darker. I'm not going to pull it back a whole lot, so I'm a -9 on this. I'm going to turn my saturation check layer off and then do my saturation adjustment layer on and off. And it just sucked out a little bit of that red. I feel like there was too much red in there. That's a lot of times a consequence of the way Photoshop deals with skin tones. I'm going to double click on the hand. I'm going to come up to my file menu. I'm going to come down and say save. And then I'm going to ask Johnny if you think this looks better than it did at the beginning. You don't have to say that. You can be honest. You can say, no, it looks horrible. I don't believe this for a second. I'm sorry, it's what? I don't know what, I have no idea what I'm trying to do. Are you trying to get here? This part? On the shadow or the figure? Oh, okay, well here we are. What about it? So is it because it's too soft or the shape is wrong, or what's the problem? The shape? Yeah. So what I would argue is, I'm going to go to back to the regular pasteboard here. What I would argue is that if I showed you this image, you would not be looking at the shadow. Immediately, your eyes go right to the girl. Yeah, that's it. Again, It's one of the problems that you run into in all commercial photography if you're working for an art director. People obsess over shit that does not matter. They obsess over backgrounds when it's like, do you realize that that girl is wearing a $200,000 one-of-a-kind outfit and you're worried that the background is like a shade too green? Yes.
So in this case, what you do is
Oh, no, you can rework this as well. Guys, I've told you this before. Shadows are going to be the bane of your existence. They are the things that take the longest. For me, I do shadows over and 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 over again. It's insane, but it's what it takes. But there's no, again, I've done nothing destructive here. I can go back in and modify that completely. I mean, here, just as an example, not that I would do this, but just as an example, we're going to zip back into this area right here. I can go back to my shadow that's causing this. So again, it's this mask right here. And I can blur the mask again. So let's say you don't like the motion blur. You prefer to actually blur it with a Gaussian blur. So fine, and I can really whack the shit out of this. Is that better? Hard to say, right? That's not my only move. So that would be one option. I could say, sure, I'm going to, I'm going to Command Z to undo that. I can actually sharpen this up. So I can, again, I can go back, I've got my layer mask selected, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. Again, this is how you choke and spread, right? I can grab the shadows and pull them in. I can grab the highlights and pull it down. I can sharpen the whole thing right back up to where it was. I can say okay to that and say, well, I don't really like that part entirely. So then I can actually come over to the blur tool, and then I can get a larger brush and turn my tablet back on. And again, working on my layer mask right here, I can scrub along this to blur it out. If I don't feel like that's strong enough, I can grab my strength and crank it all the way up and really smack this thing. I mean, there's an infinite way to edit this stuff on and on and on. But getting this stuff sort of placed the way it would really be is much better, more believable compositing than a lot of what I'm seeing here, which is either no shadows at all or shadows that don't make any sense based on the light. Are we good on this part, guys? Okie dokie. You can close this up. It's not homework. You have no more homework other than your final. I know, right? But we still have more work to do in this class, so don't take. All right. Okay. Recoloring. So this is also in week 10. There's a file in here called Shirt Dark version 2. So again, week session 10 or session 10. I'm in your all's folder. This Shirt Dark. I'm going to double click on this to launch this. Then I'm going to go find my recipe for this. So when I say recipes for this, this actually, what I'm going to show you guys right now, it's like the pen tool. This comes out of a book that was written back in, I think like 91 or 92. It goes way back. It hasn't been in print for years. I've tried to find it for other people. You can't find it anymore. But it was a real industrial, it was called, shit, I'm not going to remember the name of it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can't find it. It was a book that was designed, it was all about industrial strength Photoshop. It had nothing to do with making, using the liquify tool to make people look like cartoon characters or any of that kind of stuff. It was just hardcore nuts and bolts. So there are 2 recipes that have come out of this. And so one of them is how to recolor something light, and the other is how to recolor something dark. And we are going to get through both of those today, as well as a couple of other things. So I'm feeling better about our time situation right now than I was when we first started our class. So how do I make this a white shirt? So I've had people do this, the smart asses in the room. They go, oh, well, you just invert it. That's now a white shirt, right? However, I would argue that this is not believable. Or, well, it looks like what it is. It is a negative of what it was, right? I mean, you can see that again, the shadows are clearly very dark. I mean, very light now, and the highlights on the top edge of the are very light. So I mean, this is clearly this was not the solution to this. So so I'm going to undo that. So how would you guys actually make this a white shirt? Yes, that's exactly what you do. You follow the recipe. So here I'm going to show you. You have the recipe. I can't strongly suggest that you, how strong I believe that you should be saving this. This recoloring fabric, if you open this up, this is converting black shirt to white, and then this is recoloring an element. So this is basically what you would do for either a light shirt or a light gray shirt or a light green shirt or any sort of the kind of the midtones. But we're going to start with the most extreme version of it, because to actually get a shirt that is black, believably white, is an incredibly challenging, difficult thing to do. So I don't bother to, again, I've told you this 1,000 times. I do not remember recipes. I don't remember how to do this. I open up the PDF every single time I go to do this, and I just follow the recipe. So we're going to do this together. I've got it printed out right here. I'm just going to follow the recipe. I'm actually going to move it so I can see it, make it even easier. Okay, so first things first. First things first. So about 4 years ago, just about this time during the semester, I completely lost my voice. Gone. Like, so I could talk like this. So I got this giant ass microphone thing and a speaker, but it sounded like Mickey Mouse who was like in a bondage dungeon with a gag ball in his mouth trying to explain all this shit in Photoshop. It was bad. It was bad. I feel like I'm heading that direction again, although no, I know this is coming from the fact that I spoke. I have not quit talking all day. So yeah, time for a hot toddy tonight. Okay, so first things first. First things first, when you take a look at this image, this is an RGB image. And again, this goes back to the problem that we have in changing color. In an RGB world, when we actually shift any of our RGB values, we don't only change color, we change tone. This goes back to the Corvette that we did in the very beginning when I asked you guys to turn the car from red to green. And everybody used hue saturation sliders to do it, but in the end, you still impacted the luminosity of the image. For me, my first move when I did it was to convert the image to LAB. And the reason we do that is that separates the luminosity from the color. We only deal with the color, not the luminosity, or we only deal with the luminosity, not the color. They're separated. That gives us, if you do the same thing that I'm going to do right now, the same process in RGB, you get kind of close, but the shadows end up not being real shadows anymore. They end up glowing with like almost a color cast to them, and you don't have color casting in shadows. Color casting happens in highlights, midtone, not even midtones. It's really the quarter tones and highlights. That's where you see color casting. And so if you do this process in RGB, you can kind of get close, but again, it perverts the shadows. It's not really as close as you think you might be. So our first move in this is to convert this to LAB. To do that, you go up to the image menu, down to mode, down to LAB. Again, this is not called lab any more than RGB is rigid, any more than CMYK would be comic. It's not that. It's LAB. All right, so you will notice up at the very top now in the parentheses next to the title of this image, it now says LAB/8, meaning this is now an LAB color space, 8-bit still. So this is our first move to actually do this. Whenever you are doing serious color correction, this should be your move. Now, when we did the extreme color correction, when we were doing the compositing last week, there's no inherent advantage to doing that part because we were not using curves to actually do that part. We were using a gradient map, very different animal. But would I, in the future, actually consider doing that? Maybe. If you're thinking about doing serious color correction, LAB should always be your first move. So if you take a look in our channels palette, you will see I've already made selections for you. there is a shirt selection, there is a label selection, and then there's finally buttons. I've put them all together for your convenience. So that would be the next move that I would make, because what I want to do is I want to change the color of the shirt, but I don't want to change the color of the buttons. I don't want to change the color of the label, and I don't want to change the color of the background. I just want to change the fabric. So that's what this mask is all about. I've just saved us time by actually doing that part. And so I'm going to create 2 copies of this layer right now. So click on your background layer, Command J to create 2 copies of this. I think it's only 2. I take that back. I lied. I'm only going to do 1. I'm going to do 1 copy of this, and then I'm going to create a group right now, and I'm going to put this layer into that group. So to create a group, if you go to the bottom of your channels palette, it's the thing that looks like a file folder. So I'm going to click on this, and it creates a group. I'm going to double click on this group, and I'm going to rename it White Shirt. Now, the layer that I just created is not in this group. You can see it's actually got its little triangle open. If we collapse it, nothing changes because there's nothing in it. I need to put this layer that we just made into the group. So grab the layer thumbnail, drag it on top of the group, and when you get the blue line that completely circles the loop, I mean the group layer, that means it'll actually put it into the group. If you continue up higher and you get just the blue line on the top, this means that you're going to move your layer 1 above the group, which in some cases you need to do. Anyway, our case, we want to put it in the group. So simply get it down where you get the entire blue line around it and let go. You'll see that the shirt moves slightly over to the right. The reason that is it's an indication that it's inside the group. If you turn off the eyeball for the group, if you collapse this, now you'll see that it collapses and it hides that layer 1. Open it back up, double click on this layer, and I think we are going to name this DSAT1. It stands for Desaturation 1. So DSAT1 is what we're going to call this. Now, no matter what recoloring you're doing, you need to get rid of the original color. To try to recolor something that already has color is infinitely more difficult to do than trying to color something that is a neutral gray. So our next move is to completely desaturate this. To do that, I've got my DSAT1 layers active, up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to desaturate. Now there's a million ways to desaturate stuff. I don't want to use adjustment layers on this. This is a destructive move by design. So again, you do it up, image menu, adjustments, down to desaturate. Now you don't see much change in this because largely it was a black and white image that we're basically looking at right now. Now I said I only want to change the color of this fabric. So to do that, I'm going to hover over my shirt channel. I'm not going to select it. I'm just hovering over the thumbnail. Control click to load that as a selection. You'll see you get all the marching ants. Come over now and select the group, not the layer that's inside of it, but the group, and we are going to add a layer mask to the group, and it should look like this. If you turn off your background layer, the one at the very bottom, you should see nothing but fabric on a transparent background. Is everybody good on this part? All right, perfect. I'm going to come back to my DSAT1 and I'm going to make 2 more copies of this. So Command J, and I'm going to rename them. I want the top one to be DSAT3. I just want to name them 1, 2, 3, but all DSAT. So again, sorry. I didn't name it any. Oh, the whole group is called White Shirt.
Oh, that's where you can
It's the name of the group. It's not the name of the channel.
No. Yes.
Yeah, the group. I just named the group white shirt. But the channel that I loaded was just called shirt. You good? I applied it as a layer mask to the group. So now what this is doing, guys, the reason we're doing this is that all three of these layers are inside the group, but I only need one layer mask that controls everything. It controls everything that's inside of the group. Does that make sense? I mean, I could go in here and put a layer mask on all three of those layers, but then what happens if I change one of them? I have to change all three. And then if I change it again, I got to change all three again. If I simply put a layer mask on the group, everything that is in the group is masked equally. Make sense? We good? Okay, you can turn off DSAT3's eyeball. You can turn off DSAT2's eyeball. Hang on. You need to activate DSAT1. So select DSAT1 so that it's actually highlighted. And then we are going to add a solid color adjustment layer on top. So the reason we select this is when we add the adjustment layer, it'll land right on top of this guy. So down to the adjustment layer, the circle that's half black, half white, click on it, come up to solid color. And the solid color we're going to add on here, I'm going to give you RGB values. We're going to do a light gray. So I'm going to drag across the red value and I'm going to type in 240. Hit the tab key to go down to the green and type in 240. Hit the tab key again to go down to the blue and 240. So basically a 240, 240, 240. It's a very light gray. That's all we're doing. You guys should know this now, right? The target that we go for in exposing for something real that we consider to be white is a 245 to 250. Pure white would be a 255. This is a 240, so it's a very light gray. We'll see. It may not be enough, but we'll see. So I'm going to say okay to that. And you can see, now we have a white shirt and we're done. No, I'm just kidding. We need to change the blending mode of this solid color adjustment layer from normal down to hard light. So again, up to normal, down to hard light. Now, this is beginning to look like a white shirt, but it's massively lacking in contrast. I could try to pull a contrast curve in here, but you are much better off basing the contrast on the image itself, which is what these DSAT 2 and 3 layers are going to allow us to do. So I'm going to turn on DSAT 2. I'm going to make that layer active, both of them, and I'm going to change the blending mode of DSAT 2 from normal down to overlay. And you can see this just built-in contrast. If you turn this on and off, you will see, sorry, not that color part, the DSAT 2 layer, this built-in contrast. Again, in an overlay situation, anything that is dark gets made darker, anything that's light gets made lighter, so this is a very quick way to do contrast. Now, this is starting to look believable to me. However, I feel like it's still lacking a little bit of contrast, so I'm going to go to DSAT 3 and do the same thing. I'm going to turn it on, I'm going to select it, turn it on, make it visible, change the blending mode to overlay, and now I've got a lot of contrast, but now you might be saying, well, yeah, but it's too much. This is no longer, this is now a light gray shirt. So we have two options. You can actually reduce the opacity of DSAT 3 down so it's hitting it a little less hard. But before I do that, instead, I'm actually going to bump up my solid color adjustment layer. So go back down to the solid color adjustment layer, double click on it, it will open back up the color picker, and I'm going to say let's raise the value from 240 to 245 for each of the RGB channels. So 245 for the red, 245 for the green, and 245 for the blue, and say okay. Now I feel like that's a little bit cleaner. I'm going to try one last move in here. I'm going to open it right back up again, and I'm going to hit it all the way up to 250. I get a little nervous going above 250, to be perfectly honest with you, but we'll try. And I think that's pretty good. So that gives us a white shirt. Now that, I keep stressing, you go in to a retouching interview and you whip this out, dumbfounded. But let's take this a step further. I'm going to collapse this group, this white shirt group. I'm going to duplicate the whole group. So simply click on it, Command J, the entire group. It simply makes a copy of it. I'm now going to create a color of this shirt, and we're going to look and decide what color it is we want. Now when you do this, it really helps to have a piece of paper handy. We need to write down a couple of notes. So I've got my handy thing right here that I'm going to put notes down on. So I am going to open up this new group. I'm going to turn off the original group, the white shirt. I'm going to leave that because, again, it's a copy of with its white shirt, and it's great. So I'm just now going to make another copy to color it. So I'm going to open up this color group right here. I'm going to go back down to my solid color, which is now that 250, 250, 250. I'm going to click on this, double click on it to open up the color picker. And you can see that when you open up the color picker, we've adjusted a whole bunch of things in here. We've played around with RGB. We haven't really touched a lot of CMYK. We have done HSB. We've actually changed stuff there. But you'll notice a thing that's over here that's called color libraries. If you click on color libraries, this will actually open up. And in this drop-down menu here, you actually have a series of color libraries. Now, unfortunately, how many people in this room have ever heard of Pantone? Pantone is like, in the United States anyway, it's like the god of color. It determines everything color. Pantone used to be a part of these color libraries, and you could actually go into these color libraries and get Pantone colors. Photoshop decided to not really orphan that, but to farm it out. Now, if you want Pantone colors available in Photoshop, you've actually got to go, you have to pay for it. And they send you something that then you load, and there you go, you're off to the races. However, if you go back to an older version of Photoshop, you can actually get Pantone colors. And that matters because a lot of times you'll have an art director who will say to you, I want this in a Pantone, blah, 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 blah. Or I want this, you know, they'll give you, they're all numbers. That's all it is. It's a Pantone 127C. And you'll say, okay, fine. That doesn't exist anymore. However, you can get these color guides that do exist here right now. So this full cone color is a standard in Europe. So we are going to do this process, and then if we have time, I will show you how to use an older version of Photoshop to actually get to a Pantone value. Make sense? Okay, so I am going to click on this full, it's the one that opens up, and I'm simply going to click somewhere in the middle of all this to actually get a color. And you can see in here, I'm getting a weird set of colors here. I clicked on like a 224. I'm gonna click somewhere else. I'm hoping this works the same way that the older Pantone colors did. So I'm going to click down here in the reds. Just remember this 2224 to see if I can get back to it really quickly. So now I'm in the 340s, something like that. I'm going to type in really quick that original number 2224. So, and it gets me back to it. So again, if you've got an art director that says, okay, I want you to, the shirt color that I want is this is this full cone 2238. Can you emulate this color? Fine. Now, I think this looks like a kind of muted color. I want something that's a little bit more lively. So it's not that we can't do this, but I'm going to go after sort of like a cyany thing. I like this blue. So I'm going to write this down. If you want to do the same exact color that I'm going to do this one at the very bottom, this full cone 3352. So I'm going to just make a quick note of that. So FOL 3352. Again, if you want to get to this exact color, simply type in 3352 really quickly. It should take you to this spot right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So I'm going to select that color. You actually need to pick it. And then I'm going to say OK to, actually I think, let me see. No, I'm going to go back to the color picker. So the little button that exists on the side, go back to color picker. And you now have a series of LAB values that describe this color. This is what you need to make a note of. if you can get an art director to give you LAB values instead of a Pantone color or a full tone color or a true match color or a DCIM color or any of that, you're much better off. But this just gets me to that. So I write down the values. So this full tone color, the LAB values are 84 for the L, minus 16 for the A, and minus 21 for the B. Now we've talked about this briefly when we were doing our color part, so I'm going to jump in there really quickly. Hang on one second. Can't believe I closed this up. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this right now just for the time being. And you'll see my shirt doesn't look a thing like that, but that's okay. But let me go back into my keynote just so that you understand how lab language numbers actually work. So here in our LAB illustration, what happens is that, again, in the B axis is the blue to yellow axis. You can see it right here. It's the blue to yellow axis. The green is, I mean the A axis is the green to magenta or the green to red. This axis is going across right here. Neutral is right in the very middle. So what they do is in the A channel, as you move out to the red, you go from 0 up to 128. That's half of our 255 or our 256 color range. To get to the green, it's 0 to a minus 127. In the B channel, yellow is 0 up to a positive 128. And to the blue, it's 0 to a negative 127. That's how the ranges are done. So it always puts 0 in the middle, which is no color at all. So the negative values that we just got in this LAB color picker, these negative values are indeed correct, and they're what we will actually put in to actually adjust this color. You'll see in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. So I've got that color in here. I've got my 2 saturation layers that are on top of this. I'm going to turn both of them off. Now, because you don't need both of them, they're really warping my color. So this is getting kind of close to the color that I think I want, but it's still lacking contrast. So I'm going to turn on my DSAT 1 just a little bit. Now, I feel like this is a little heavy-handed. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit by clicking on the DSAT layer that's adding this contrast and simply dropping the opacity down till I feel like it, yeah, is this like a normal shirt? I'm not completely focused on the color right now. I just want this to look, I don't want it to look flat. I don't want it to look too contrasty. I want it to kind of look like in the middle. So for me, I drop my opacity down to almost 50%. Is this working for everyone? Then the final move on this is that I am actually then going to put a color picker point right in the middle of this guy. So over to your tool palette, the eyedropper tool, down to the color sampler tool, and drop a point right in the middle. You do not want to put this point on a highlight. You don't want to put this on a shadow. You want to put it on what you really feel like the color of this shirt should actually be. And then you can see the LAB readout that I'm getting right here. I can now change this with a curve. So to change this with a curve, I'm simply going to add an adjustment layer on top of this. So the little circle at the bottom, half black, half white, click on it. We're going to add a curve on this. And in my curve, I no longer have RGB. I have lightness, A and B. So in my lightness, I'm going to grab my targeting adjustment tool. That's the hand that's right up at the very top in the properties panel. I'm going to come over right on this color point. You will see that it picks the spot on my curve where I need to adjust this. The note that I wrote down is that my lightness is an 84. My info palette is telling me this is a 65. So I'm going to click on that point and push up until I get to 84. My B channel is, my A channel is a minus 16. That's exactly what the LAB color was that I wrote down. And then my B channel is a minus 21, which is also exactly what got written down. But if it was different, let's say my A channel was something else, I would simply go to the A channel, still using the targeting adjustment tool, click on this. If I need to have the value raised, I come up. If I need it down, I pull down. But in my case, I don't need to do either one. Those are the exact colors. This is now the exact color of this in LAB. So then we are going to collapse this group and we are going to rename that white shirt copy FOL 3352. And then we just keep doing this. Why does this matter to you? What's the most important thing in your career? Thank you. It is the money. It is the money, the money, the money. So a client comes to you and says, I've got 100 shirts to shoot. It's all the same shirt. It's just 100 different colors, 100 variations of color. Give me an estimate for what you'll do it for. So I say, fine, I'll do that. Give me overnight. Always buy time. Always, I've told most of the people who are in my other classes, but I'll tell you guys this as well. Whenever you get that phone call, they're always going to ask for it right away. You never want to give it to them right away. You want to be able to think this process out. So your line, no matter what, you could be in bed having wild marathon sex. It does not matter. You say to them on the phone, I am on set right now. I can't do anything about this until tonight. I will get the estimate to you sometime tomorrow. Number one, it buys you time. Number two, it makes you seem like you're working. And number three, it lets you get back to your marathon sex without talking on the phone for an hour. Always, I don't care, never, ever, ever, ever answer the phone with a client where you're not working. Never. Weekends, holidays, middle of Christmas, 3 o'clock in the morning, sorry, I'm on set right now. I know it sounds weird, but I am. Guys, we live in a lot. We lie for a living. This is how you make money. So anyway, going back to this, I'm going to do the quick estimate for this. Down and dirty, somebody check my math. So I'm going to say to the client, fine, I probably can do 20 shirts in a day. That means it's going to take me 5 days to do this. I'm going to charge you $3,000 a day. That would be my Chicago rate to do something like this. If it was a local company, probably less. But if it was like a department store, a Macy's for Chicago area, what, $3 grand a day. If I was in New York, it'd be 5 easy. But at any rate, so let's $3 grand a day. So times 5 days, that's $15,000, right? So that's where I'm going to start. So I need a studio, and we're just going to do $1,000 a day for that. So now I'm at $35,000. I need a stylist to actually do this. So a stylist is going to be at least $1,000 a day. I'm just doing the cheap math. That's another $5,000. So now I'm at $40,000. I need 2 assistants. I'm not going to do 2 assistants. I need 1 digital tech and 1 assistant. And so again, the total of that together, let's just say another $500. So it's another $2,500. So now I'm at $42,500. I need a stylist assistant. That's going to bump it up now. I'm at $45,000. I need catering for all of that. So that's going to be another, say, $1,500. I need rental equipment for this. So all of a sudden I'm up into the $60,000 for this job, kind of ballparking it, right? And they say, okay, fine. And I say, that's great. Send me the shirts, right? So I get the shirts. I hire a studio for half a day. You can do that. It's shitty, but people let you do it. People also need money, so anyway, half day is better than no day, right? I would never stiff my crew like that. I would always hire the stylist for the full day, stylist assistant for the full day, assistant for the full day, digital tech for the full day. I would do all of that. I would also do catering. We'll have a party. So I go in, I actually do 1 single shirt. I have it completely styled, put down on the board. I have a list of what the other 99 colors will be. I shoot that 1 shot, I leave. I actually let my digital tech do this. I don't even do this shit. I just bill it. So the digital tech, it'll take him the rest of the day to do the other 99 colors. So I'm in and out of the studio. My rate, it was only that $3 grand, right? So my total billing in this is basically $5,000. My cost, now, if you remove me from it, it's $2 grand. And I bill 60 for it. Are you out of your fucking mind? Do you know what kind of money that is? That's real money. And it's all this. You don't need a stylist to do 100 shirts. You need them to do 1. You don't need to relight this. You don't need to pen board this. You don't need to do any of that shit. You need to do 1. And then you simply go into post and you give them the exact color, the perfect color. Not, oh yeah, we got close, sorry, my lights were a little warm. Well, this is the perfect color. We've measured this out. I can do this all day long. I can open this up, make another copy of this, go in and do another color, another copy of it, another color, another copy of it, another color, another. How long is it going to take you to do this? A day? Even if it's me doing it. Yes.
How do you get the right colors?
They will give you the right colors. And if you've actually got the shirt itself, those things that you use to actually scan to do the color to color calibrate your monitor, they actually do color. They're spectrometers. They'll actually measure the color of the shirt for you. Just drop it on there, and you can either get the color out in LED or RGB. I mean, you can convert all of that, but that's how you would do it. But usually they give you a color code for it, and usually again it's in Pantone, which gets us back to how we get back to Pantone. But yes, yes, Zoe. Right. Well, again, it's all what they're ultimately looking for. Typically, in stuff like this, they are looking for, you know, the people who do this, like, you know, the big, you know, we have thousands of colors, that kind of stuff, whatever. A lot of times they don't want to really get it into a single shot. They'll do small little versions of every one of the colors, whatever. I mean, that really depends. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get into having to composite this shit together. You don't want to have to, because this is like really formal shirt stuff like this. In a lot of, in the 80s, things changed a lot and people got into doing really sort of more casual, rumpled kind of, you know, they would like hang 10 shirts off the side of a bed. And then that would be the color swatches for it. It wasn't ever meant to really show the shirt. It was just meant to do the color swatches. Conceivably, you could do that, but that means you're going to have to mask every single one of those. So, I mean, you really got to pick your poison with that whole one. Again, what I'm trying to suggest to you is that the idea of doing multiple colors of something can be a gold mine for you people if it lands right. But that's a case-by-case basis. It's not always going to be this way, but this is a pretty great way of doing it. This is also how, again, this is not just shirts. This is how you change the color of a car, how you change the color of hair, how you change the color of skin, how you change the color of shoes, lawns, windows, ceilings, roofs, walls, everything. Go ahead. With a multiple color what? Oh, no, you know, that's a great question. And not unless you can isolate the colors, no, you would never be able to do this part. Could you shift it? Yes. But again, you'll get one color right, but that doesn't mean the others will be right. So, like I'm looking at Chloe's shirt. I mean, so I could make this shirt white. I could make it any color, but I would have to mask out the, you know, the Rolling Stone tongue thing. I would have to mask that part out, and then if they wanted that color to be shifted as well, then I would shift. So this goes into sort of like what Zoe was talking about, is that you run into this. It can get more complicated. It might just be simpler to shoot the other shirt. Questions about this? Anything? Okay. We have time to do one other really quickly, and I'm just going to show you how to do it. It goes a little bit faster than this. It's kind of based on the same principle, but we will bang through it. We've got 7 minutes, so we're going to hop. So the other one that's in here is go back to our session 10. It's Shirt Light version 2, if you can open that one up. So guys, I'm just going to barrel through this one. If you can keep up, that's great, but we've only got 7 minutes, so I don't really have the luxury of pausing to wait. So this is just how I'm going to do it. Again, our first move is to convert this to LAB. So up to the image menu, down to mode, down to LAB. So now I've got something to work with. If you go and take a look at our channels, you can see that I do have the buttons in one channel, I've got the labels in another, and then I've just got the outline of the shirt in one. I need this to be complete. I want a single mask on this. So I need to actually have the buttons and the labels be part of this shirt. To do that, hover over the buttons channel, hold down the command key, click to load it as a selection. go back down to the shirt channel now and select it, and then fill this with black. Again, I want to hide the change from the buttons. I only want to change the color of the fabric. So black is my foreground color, Option Delete, Command D to deselect. Hover over the labels now as well. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the labels. Hover over the label channel, thumbnail, hold down the Command key, click to load it as a selection, go back down to the shirt channel and fill this also with black. Option Delete, Command D to deselect. Now I've got a complete version of the shirt that I need to use to actually do the masking. I'm going to create a new group in my layers channel. I'm going to come over to the shirt that is now complete with buttons and labels. Hold down the Command key to click to load that as a selection and put it on top of my group. So I'm going to, again, to add the mask to the group so that the mask masks everything that is inside of that group. So simply add layer mask to that. So now you can see in this layer mask, anything that is white will show up. Anything that is black will actually be hidden. Then, I got that part there, got that. I am going to, again, then copy my background layer. So select the background layer, Command J to make a copy of it. Double click on it and rename this DSAT1. Drag DSAT1 into the group. Now remember, you need the entire blue outline to go around the group to make sure that it's going into the group. So it's now sitting inside of the group. We are now going to add a new color for my shirt. So I'm going to add a solid color adjustment layer above this. And ironically, I'm going to make the very same color shirt that we just had. So I'm going to grab, I've got the LEB values right here. I'm going to grab the L value right here and type in 84. Hit the tab key to go down to my A channel, and I'm going to put in a -16. Tab key down again to the blue channel and a -21. This is now the same color that we were dealing with in the last version of the shirt, and I'm going to say OK to that, and then I'm going to change the blending mode of this from normal down to multiply. So this is giving me that same shirt again on this. If I needed contrast, more contrast on this shirt, I would simply make a copy of DSAT1. So I don't think I need contrast, but if I did, I would make a copy of DSAT1, Command J. I would then drag that up on top of my color, new color layer, and change its blending mode from normal down to overlay, which builds in contrast. You can see not really good, but nonetheless, that's what happens. So I don't need it though. This is the shirt that looks great just like it is. But I'm not entirely certain that it is exactly that color. So I'm going to grab the color sampler tool. I'm going to drop it again right in the middle of the shirt and look at my readout. And you can see I'm close, but I'm not quite there. So I am going to add a curve to this. In my lightness channel, I'm going to grab the targeting color picker. I'm going to come down on my sample layer on the shirt where it's actually sampling it. It's currently reading in an 81. I need it to read an 84, so I'm going to click and drag up slightly. I'm going to go to my A channel now. My A channel should be a -16. Mine's a -15. So I'm going to click on the targeting adjustment point and pull it down 1 till I get 16. And then finally, I'm going to go to my B channel, click on the same spot here, and pop it up 1 to get a -21. I'm sorry, down 1 to get a -21. Done. I know. Questions? Oh, I got that done in 6 minutes. All right, so that's it for today. For those of you that I'm going to see next week, I'll see you next week. For those of you that I'm not going to see next week or later this week, whatever, have a great holiday, a great break. Take some time off. Do not work the whole thing. I know finals are coming up. I know all of this. I know that, but carve out just a little bitty block of time, and be really selfish about it. Get drunk, get stoned, get high, do whatever you do.
I mean, it's a normal Thanksgiving if you don't do it.
Yeah, argue with argue with your family. Don't bring up the election. That would be one thing I would say probably avoid. But other than that, I will see everybody on the other side. Somebody please send me an email to remind me to record to do a Zoom meeting for next week.
Thank you very much.